Okay, calling to order the May 2nd, 2019 Lakewood Planning Commission meeting. Go to the roll call, please.
Mr. Baker?
Here.
Mr. Cruzen?
Here.
Mr. McMahon?
Here.
Ms. Rossiter? Here. Mr. Sattler?
I'll make a motion to excuse Mr. Sadler.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Any discussion regarding the minutes from the April 4th, 2019 meeting? None, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? There is none. We have the opening remarks, please.
Good evening and welcome to the Lakewood Planning Commission meeting. The commission is made up of 5 members charged with evaluating proposals as required by Lakewood Zoning Code and Community Vision. The charter of the city establishes the authority of the commission and that it shall be made up of 5 members. Members of the commission are volunteer Lakewood residents appointed to terms by the mayor and city council. Please be respectful in your conversations with them. Tonight, the commission shall hear testimony from each applicant making presentation for their docket item. The commission may also take public comment for each docket item, and public commentary shall only address that specific docket item being considered. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. We will raise a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining. A red card will be raised when your time has expired. While you are welcome to state your agreement with prior commentary that has been made, please make an effort to provide new comments you find relevant to the commission, as time is limited and the commission welcomes a variety of viewpoints and diversity of information. You may submit your feelings, statements, or concerns in writing to the secretary to have them included as a matter of public record. Anyone addressing the commission tonight will please sign the oath and state your name and address for the record prior to addressing the commission.
Thank you very much. Just make a note about the docket here tonight. There are 2 items of old business that will be deferred. So the market rate apartments at Detroit and Bunce and the market rate apartments at the Berry site will not be heard tonight. If you're here for that item, you are welcomed and encouraged to stay for the rest of it and the other development that's going on, but those specific items will not be heard tonight. So we'll go right into our first item, which is 1 Lakewood Place, docket number 092818.
Mr. Chair, as the applicants making their way up to the podium, I just wanted to provide a brief introduction on tonight's project. I'm going to be turning the microphone over to Greg Solstice from RDL here shortly to work us through the final submission for the plan development at 1 Lakewood Place. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, we started this process in September of 2018 right here in this room, and I've had a number of discussions both formally with Planning Commission and ABR, but also informally via community meetings. A lot of dialogue with our neighbors on Marlowe and Bell, and the plan submitted tonight is incredibly thorough, and there's certainly a lot to get through. I've challenged Greg to swiftly move through some of the details tonight based on how thick your packet is over there. But I also want to give them the opportunity to share how much this project has evolved. It really has been a true collaboration between the commission, the developer, the city, the neighbors, and ABR to get to a project that's really strong. So tonight, you're going to hear from Greg on the full submission, and then we're also going to turn it over to Chris from Langen to follow up on the traffic impact analysis, of which we heard the first of last month at Planning Commission. The city has a few slides that we would like to work through, open it up for initial feedback and comments and questions from the commission, open it up to public comment and questions from those in the audience, and then close public comment and go into any discussion on those comments and further dialogue from the commission, and then consider a vote.
Sounds great.
Real quick, just to recap the approval process, Planning Commission reviewed the preliminary approval and voted on that in December of this year, or December of last year, I'm sorry. ABR is still reviewing the project, and applicant will be back in front of ABR next Thursday. Planning Commission will consider its final development approval tonight. ABR is required to Also, consider its final approval, and then City Council has the ultimate vote on the rezoning for plan development. So, Mr. Chair, this is what the Commission's role is tonight. Shall be to review any application for a final plan development plan approval and make a recommendation to the Director to approve with conditions, or to deny the application based on its compliance with Section 1156.03 of the Code. So with that, I will turn it over to Greg to walk us through the submission.
Thanks, Bryce. Hi, I'm Greg Soltis from RDL Architects, 16102 Chagrin Boulevard, Shaker Heights, Ohio.
Welcome back, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. So your packet is 99 pages, and so is the digital presentation. So I am going to move quickly. If you have questions or you want me to go back or stop, just let me know, and we'll just do this as we go. Sound good?
Very good.
Okay. And when we get to, so this is what we're going to go over tonight. Just a quick overview: building heights, building setbacks, lot coverage, permitted uses, parking diagram, truck turning diagrams, streetscape plans, landscaping, and then circulation. Within circulation will be the traffic analysis, and then Chris will come up and cover that briefly. And then we'll talk a little bit about the plaza and the lighting. Okay? So you've seen this many, many times. It's being tweaked, as we've gone through. Right, you can see right now just some small things like, we've extended the paving from out in the plaza into the Winter Garden. So we've really started to look at what the Winter Garden is going to become. And the intent was always for this to be an extension of the plaza space and function as, a public type of amenity for the residents of the city. And then, north is to the right. This is Detroit Avenue. The purple are the commercial components of the project. This is the Curtis block on the corner here. This is a street that we're adding that's really more of a service street. Parking garage. The tangerine color are the brownstone liner units. The orange color is the apartment building. This first set of yellow are walk-ups, and these are for-sale townhomes on the back. This is an updated rendering that shows the direction that we're going with the commercial building. And the rest of this, we've gotten recent approval from ABR with the residential. They really like where it's going, and you'll see some elevations as we keep moving forward. And then this is a rendering of the plaza, showing the Curtis block and the retail and commercial office component. So first, we're going to go over building heights. The way that this is set up, and most sections are set up this way, is there's a plan in the beginning. All of them are color-coded very clearly. In almost every slide, when you see the plan, the colors are consistent. Gray for garage, because it's cars and concrete. And then purple for mixed use, blue for the Curtis block, and then these different other colors for the residential components. When you look here, we've tried to show the differentiations in the roof. So here on the office building, you can see 125 feet for a maximum potential height for this portion of the building, 75 feet for this, and you see the setback that we've done here to be kind to the residents on the street, and this would be a 45-foot height. 46 feet here, and some of these have changed since what you saw previously. Similar here and here, there's a grade change from here up to here, which is why this is higher on this side. Walk-ups at 40 and 35 respectively. Again, this street right here is about almost 8 feet higher than here, so you actually drive down. When we take these building heights, we're taking them from the point where the building meets the right-of-way. So from here up to the top, is 35 feet. On the buildings that have angled roofs, it's to the midpoint of the roof, which is what the code requires, and that's shown in the diagrams. And then the text from the code is right here. So here's a rendered elevation of the commercial building, and you can see the ground floor, second floor, third, so on and so forth to the top of the building here at 125 feet. Again, for the parking garage, maximum of 65 feet here at the central stair. For the apartment building, max at 75 feet to the top of the building. That's really more in the center of the block. for the brownstones, 46 feet at the top of the mansard roofs here. These are the walk-ups. So this 32.6 is to the midpoint of the roof, again, which is what this code states, where we take the height from. So you can see the midpoint of the roof is here and here, on either side. So when you're standing on the sidewalk, the building, the massing of the building diminishes as it moves away from the street. These are the 3-story walk-ups, 40'6", and again, here and here, midpoint of the roof. And these are the ones on Bell. The 2 stories are on Marlowe. And you can see here that grade change from the front of the building to the back, which doesn't really happen on Bell. Bell's from front to back is relatively flat across. So these are the townhouses on Marlowe, 30'6" to the midpoint of the roof here. And again, you can see it on a side elevation, so it's much more clearly understood. And these are the townhouses on Bell. So the difference between, the units for the walk-ups and the townhouses on Bell and Marlowe is that we have that drop from the street level where Marlowe is to behind, that 8-foot drop. So what we've done is we've tucked the garages underneath the living space. We can't do that on Bell. So on Bell, the garages are in the rear of the first floor, and then there's, it would either be an additional bedroom or a den or some sort of additional living space in the front of the units. And then these are the townhouses that are on the Paseo. These also have that condition where from the front of the townhouse, which faces the Paseo, there's an 8-foot drop to the back of them. So we were able to tuck the cars in the garages underneath the living space. And this is 27 to 28 feet to the midpoint of the roof. So from this point here up to here is 27 to 28 feet. So the next section are building setbacks. What we've done here is we've, again, used the same color scheme so that it's easy to locate what you're looking at. And then we've shown the building setbacks. So here, when you see the light lavender, you can say 3'8" to 16'4" on these facades, depending on where it is and where the property line is. This darker color, this darker lavender color, is 3510, 3310 to 35 feet. The property line is angled a little bit, so that's where that difference comes in, is if you're taking the measurement here to here or the measurement here to here. Same thing here for the apartment or for the brownstones, 9 inches to 3 feet. So depending on where you are along the sidewalk and where the property line is and the face of the building is, that's the range of the setback. For the apartments, very similar condition on the sides here to the brownstones. The walk-ups, on one side we have a little bit more room than the other as far as the distance from the property line to the face of the porch, and that's where we took it from. And then the townhomes have really a number of different conditions. There's 3 different conditions along the streets because we've kind of stepped them back, so we make that transition to the single-family residential here. And then all along the Paseo, there's that 30-foot distance that we have from the property line to the face of the building. So, when you look on these, we've done these diagrams so you could very easily understand the conditions that are happening. So this is taken right here at the commercial building on Marlowe. So you can see where the property line is. And then what we've done is we've shown the distance from the property line to the face of the building. We've also shown the sidewalk or the pedestrian throughway, the amenity strip, the curb, any parking, on-street parking if there is some. We also have these traffic calming curb elements that we've shown. That's one of the things that was talked about in the code where we can do traffic calming, we are, and all the way across the street. This is on the other side, on the Bell side of the commercial building. So again, you can see the same condition, property line, and all the different sections of the sidewalk and street. These are the brownstones. This right here is kind of that English basement apartment that we've done with the brownstones, which is actually below the sidewalk, so you can see the steps coming down there. But again, you can see the property line, the pedestrian throughway, amenity strip, curb, so on and so forth. This is the condition at the apartment building where you've seen as before, we've treated the sides of the apartment building that face the street very much like we did the brownstones. So it kind of seems like an extension of the brownstone architecture as it wraps the corner. These are the walk-ups. And then this is a diagram that shows, from NACTA, that shows the traffic calming features that we've put into the streets. And then again, the property line, sidewalk, amenity strip. So they're pretty easy to follow as you go from section to section. These are the different townhome conditions. Next is lot coverage. So again, we have the plan, and then all the same uses that you've seen on the slides before. The colors are all the same. And then it shows the percentage of the overall site that each of these building types take up. So 2.8% for the Curtis block, 17.6% for this mixed-use commercial, so on and so forth down here. And then the urban open space and common open space, which is also verbiage that's taken from the code. What we've done here is we've taken all the space that is intended for as kind of amenity space or places where people could be on the site, and we've tallied that up, so it's about 25% of the overall site. I think 20% was what the requirement was when we were negotiating things with the city. So we've exceeded that, and we really have taken care to make the space, as you'll see when you see the landscaping plans, be places that people really want to be. And then on every slide, and I mentioned this to you all last time, on any slide, the text that's at the bottom here explains things in further detail. Most of the time, that is 100% from the city's code, or mostly from the code, and we've added additional notes to it. Permitted uses, again, this is a very similar plan, but what this does is it shows those uses. It defines the use groups at the bottom. So, for example, here with commercial use groups, it lists out what is allowed by code for commercial use groups and residential use groups. The privately owned public space, which is what's defined in the green here, is the half acre that was part of the agreement as well. So this green space is exactly half acre. And then what is also listed here are the currently intended either square feet or unit counts. So for example, for retail, it says 79,000 square feet. So that is the square footage of retail that we have currently in the plan. Then we have listed a maximum. So the maximum would be 100,000 square feet of retail. The reason why those are in there is because a lot of this stuff is in flux as things get priced out, as negotiations are made with tenants. So there's a little bit of flexibility in here, but it's clearly outlined here. So you can see for the commercial office, 101,000 square feet, 140,000 max. And then unit counts are down here for each unit type with a maximum of 220 residential units on the site. And then there's a note down here for outdoor dining that comes from the code, which would be intended for some of the space along the retail facades. Our parking diagram, and Kyle pointed out, I missed 4 cars. So there's 2 cars that could potentially park here and 2 cars that could potentially park here. Those spaces are intended for visitors or when they're leasing up the apartments, those places where they have, future tenants parking here because the entrance to the parking or to the apartment building is right here. But again, what this does, it shows the total number of on-street parking. So that's 40. Private garage parking are parking for the people that will rent in the walk-ups or buy these townhouses. They all have garage in the accessible from the rear. Oops. And then the public garage, it shows how much per level. And one of the important things to note here is that 100 spaces of the public garage will be dedicated to public use. Much of the rest of the space will be for residents of the apartment building, people that work in the office building, and we've also shown the locations for bike parking on the site. And this right here, just, we've thought a lot and we reviewed RTA's requirements for bus stops and what's needed for the distance behind the buses. So we've located the bus stop right here. And I'll show you that when we get to the plaza diagrams as well. The truck turning diagrams are pretty self-explanatory, and you've seen these before. So when you look at these, you can see what the actual truck is with its dimensions, whether it be a fire truck or a garbage truck. And then this, the civil engineers ran through to show that, how the truck would maneuver through the site. So this is the fire truck. This was given to us from the Lakewood Fire Department. And one of the things that we've noted on here is that, the intention for this curb on the interior is that this would be rolled curbs or, curbless. So it's intended that the trucks can go up on the curb, so that gives them a little bit of extra room. It also allows us to make it feel better back there, so it just doesn't feel like all asphalt. But, that's where a sidewalk will be, there'll be plantings, so it'll be a nicer environment for pedestrians. So again, there's a fire truck, fire truck, fire truck. And then the garbage truck, when we show the garbage trucks, we've also showed where the locations of the trash are. So, when the truck comes in here, he's going to back up a little bit, roll this trash out. This is the trash from the apartment building. Load that up onto the truck. Pick all these people's trash up just like you'd pick up any single-family residential type trash. They'll put their trash out in the back, and he can get out. Again, they can do that here. Pull in, roll the trash out, load it up. Pull over here, pull the trash out, load it up, so on and so forth as they go through. This trash here, these are intended for the brownstones, and these trash here and here are for the commercial users. And this also shows how trucks would make deliveries. Trucks would always, they're required by the city to use Detroit Avenue and not the residential streets to access this. Streetscape plans, what we've done here, this is a really detailed site plan that shows dimensions all over it. It's a little bit hard to read when you're looking at it in full scope. So what we've done is we've divided up into 9 sheets and done blow-ups on the following sheets. So you can see what the dimensions are from the center line to the curb, from the center line to the face of the building, the width of the right-of-way, the dimensions in the back of the units from this curb, and again, this is a rolled curb. So if your grandma moves into this apartment and she has trouble backing out, she can go over the curb and it's all good. She's not going to hit anything, right? Unless someone's standing there. But so you can see all this here. My grandma used to do that. And this shows the dimensions in the plaza, and it moves through the site. So you can see everything clearly laid out. And then here we have typical street sections here, and then the right-of-way widths for all the streets around. And then this diagram is also paired with the setbacks, so you can compare, the right-of-ways, the setbacks, all on one sheet. For landscaping, this is actually more than is required, so for Planning Commission, but we already did it for ABR, so we're going to show it to you too because it's beautiful. So you can look and you can see all the different types of plants, what the species are, the numbers of them, the sizes of them, and this is also divided up into different parts of the site. But when you look at the plan, it does really kind of give you an idea of what it's going to feel like to be in some of these spaces. This is the paseo. So these are the courtyards, the residential courtyards, the paseo that goes by the apartment entrance, and then the little street that we have on the interior of the block. This is the paseo, the plantings intended for there. These are the walk-up units. You can also see here what's intended for the streets. And again, you see this information in multiple ways throughout there, right? Where we have the street section, you're going to be able to see what this is and understand it. You can also look at it here in plan and understand it. So by comparing some of the sheets, there's a lot of information. It's the same information shown in many different ways, so you can really get a good understanding of what it's going to look like. This is the commercial building along Bell Avenue, and then the commercial building along Marlowe Avenue. Circulation, we've divided this up into pedestrian and then vehicular circulation. So on this diagram, you see the primary paths. These are really like pedestrian circulation through the city, so you're on a city sidewalk. Secondary circulation paths that cut through the site. So these are those, this is the paseo and a paseo. These are the two major paseos that we've created through the site. This is the additional street we're bisecting the block with. These show the primary ways of, entering up to the Winter Garden and accessing the commercial components of the project from the main streets. And then these tertiary paths are just additional pedestrian paths that we've put through there, this, additional little sort of cut through on the block, and these cut throughs from the Paseo back into the apartment building. And then the green arrows show primary building entrances, and the little ones show secondary building entrances. These are really more like, individual shop entrances. These are major entrances into each building. And then this is vehicular circulation. Looks like a subway map. I told Crystal to make it look like a subway map. We're just missing, well, we have one dot. So this shows the 26 bus, goes up and down Detroit. Here's the bus stop. And then there's the different types of, city service vehicles, commercial service vehicles, commercial office and retail users. And you can see that they really only access the front or the northern portion of the site. It's really more residential users back here, and then trash pickup that goes back here. Chris, you want to come up and talk about traffic?
So it's always tough following the architect because they have pretty pictures and everything looks great. And then I come up to talk about traffic, and nobody likes traffic, so.
I was going to tell you not to make them snooze. But...
Yeah, so I will try my best. Thanks, Greg, for going first. That's great. To recap briefly where we left off last meeting, I kind of gave you a big picture overview of what the traffic study was and what it included. Just one of the things I wanted to recap from that was, we did a trip generation comparison. Basically, how much traffic did the former use generate, the hospital on the site, versus what the proposed use would be. And those calculations yielded out that it was, in some cases, the proposed development was a little bit less. In some cases, maybe a little bit more, but overall, almost kind of a wash. So I wanted to recap that first. And then a big effort from last month to this month was just to basically respond to comments that we received from planning staff, as well as yourselves, and public comments. Some of the ones to highlight were the use of the term no build. So, as described, no build is the condition when your proposed development isn't built. In this case, it's comparing back to what the former use was. So we kind of went through the report and made sure we clearly identified that the no build condition was when the previous hospital was in use, so the former use. There was also some discussions about the trip distributions for the former hospital, basically the split between how much traffic was on Marlowe versus how much traffic was on Bell. And so we took into account, again, planning comments, public comments, and we shifted some of that traffic that we were showing on Marlowe over to Bell, which we think, represents a little bit better of what that former use was. And so some of these slides speak to responding to those comments, and I'll get to a few others. So this slide here just kind of shows, again, where we were trying to place where the former traffic was for the hospital and how we shifted it from Marlowe over to Bell. This next one is, again, with that change in the shift in traffic projected-wise, what would that no-build condition be? And so we just updated those volumes, updated the analyses. Likewise, we made some slight adjustments to the distributions for the proposed development. And then this figure then shows what that would be when you add on top, the existing volumes plus our proposed development. We run through calculations to do this grading system on how traffic is operating. In the report, it's a bunch of tables. We tried to condense it here for you to, I guess, better illustrate so you don't have to sift through. So basically, at an intersection here, we show what this left turn movement is operating at, as well as this shared through right movement. And then overall, what those two movements together makes that approach. So how that approach is operating, and it's, grading scale A, B, C, D, E, F. And then when you do that for all approaches, then it calculates how do you grade the intersection. And so although you might not be able to see the various letters here, hopefully you can pick out the colors. So level service A and B, overall intersection we labeled with green. So you can see all these intersections under the proposed build conditions, so with the proposed development, are operating at a level of service A or B. So good, 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 good. This is all very, very good. This intersection here is operating at an overall level of service C or D range. Again, C or D is acceptable in urban conditions, so no issues there. So I mean, overall, with the proposed development, you can see, we're not projecting any kind of traffic issues, specifically at the intersections and how they operate. We were requested to look at a signal warrant and a four-way stop warrant at the intersection of Marlowe and Franklin. And so this here shows the results of the peak hour signal warrant. So you can see the lines here. If you're on this side of the line, that means you meet a peak hour signal warrant. If you're down here, that means you do not meet a peak hour signal warrant. So we looked at the existing conditions, AM, PM, Saturday, those peak hours. We looked at the conditions with the former hospital, and we looked at the conditions with our proposed development. And you can see the warrants are not satisfied under any of those conditions, a peak hour signal warrant. Typically, if you don't meet a peak hour signal warrant, you're not going to meet any of the other 9, 10, 11 warrants. So it's kind of a good rule of thumb just to either see if you're possibly going to meet or you're not going to meet at all. So in this case, you can see we're far below. You actually need at least 100 vehicles on the minor approach, so on the Marlowe approach, to even hit the line. But to get there, you have to have 1,400, 1,500 vehicles on Franklin, which in this case you can see we're down here. And then we looked at a four-way stop warrant as well. The purpose of a four-way stop is when there's an equal distribution of traffic on all approaches. Again, the bulk of traffic is on Franklin, and Marlowe is very light. The Franklin approach needs to have 300 plus, which it does, but the Marlowe approach needs to have 200, which it doesn't. So this is existing, and then again with the former hospital, again we're not meeting, we're not coming close, and then with the proposed, again same thing. So to answer those two questions, both the signal warrant and the four-way stop warrant were not satisfied. I think I hit on all the comments.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so we're going to review the plaza. What we've done, this is an illustrative site plan showing the intent for the plaza currently. It's still something that we're working on, but I wanted to go through how we got where we are today. So this is a diagram that shows all the conditions we're going to talk about on one page so you can see how they relate to each other. The first thing that really set the tone for the design and the direction of the design was the topography. And you can see here that, this is at 74 feet. This is at 83 feet. So there's a 9-foot grade change, around a 9-foot grade change that we need to make from this corner up to here. It's less from here and here, but not by much. So what that did is we were like, okay, we need to put some ramps in here to get people up here. So what we've done is we've created 2 ramps that are ADA accessible, and ADA accessible to the point where they don't need railings, so they don't feel like something separate. I had to walk down an ADA ramp today, and I was like, isn't there a faster way to do this? Because you're like, boom, 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 and there's railings, right? So this is to create a really nice environment so everybody feels like part of this space. So what we did is, in this area here where we had to take upgrade, is where we put in plantings and use that topography to create a really nice layering effect and allow people to have different vantage points from within the plaza, whether you're looking up, you're looking down. Changing the vertical space in a plaza makes that space so much more interesting for people to use. The next thing is just to define what is the privately owned public space. So this portion of the plaza is that half acre that is privately owned land but is intended for the public to use. So it's basically cuts out this portion that you'll see on another slide that's for private dining for the restaurants. Potentially, that's what that's for. There will be public access up here, so the public will be allowed to get up, come up here on a daily basis anyways, but this is just getting into the technicalities of what the agreement says. Here, we're showing circulation. So again, you can see these two ADA paths that we've created, and then the existing circulation of the pedestrians on the city sidewalks, and then all the different ways that we've created for people to move through the space. So, if you enter at this corner, you can go up this staircase, you can go up this staircase, you can walk up this hill, with this break in the seating here. As you enter here, you can cross the path there. So the point is that there's a lot of different ways to move through this site, and it, again, is something that makes it much more highly experiential for people and much more interesting. The other thing we've done, this has a lot of organic sort of shapes and forms in it, mixed with some formal elements like the LA, but there is a formalism to this in that when you walk in here, you're centered on what's, the splash pad that's intended to be here, on this entrance right here. As you walk in here, you're going to look up over the water wall to the entrance of the Winter Garden. So there's all these formal views that we've created in there. So all of these things come together so that when people are moving through the site, it's going to be a really great experience for them. Then there's the hardscape portion of the plaza. This portion of the plaza is the lower portion, which is intended to be pervious, and then the rest of the site, which will be of other different types of brick materials. We have the landscape plan, so you can see in the darker green are where there will be grass, or where there will be different kinds of plantings. And then the lighter green are the trees. So again, we're thinking about this very three-dimensionally, so not just about the horizontal surfaces, but what is your experience in 3 dimensions? So what's vertically above you, creating a canopy that's going to provide shade, and also absorb some of the sound from the city. And then seating, there's different types of seating, fixed and movable seating, which you can see here. So there are fixed seating elements along the walls here, and then various different types of furniture. So there's movable furniture, there's park benches, which are also fixed. But the point being is that, we're using best practices here. One of the things that you'll see listed in best practices is for every 30 square feet of space, there should be 1 linear foot of seating. So we are doing our best to meet all those best practices as we design this. If I were to go into the details about all that, it would be like class in here, and we don't want that. So I just want you to know that, when we're designing this space, we're taking all those things very seriously. This portion right here and this portion right here are intended for outdoor dining for the various retail tenants that will be occupying these spaces. This is a zoomed in sort of look at the plaza. So you can start to see, how we've transitioned from the lower area to the upper area. The other thing we've done here is, this is a commercial building that will have retail and office components. Part of our client's ability to sell this building and lease this building is that the commercial office component, that they have access to this plaza. So we've divided it up into 3 primary spaces, which is this terrace up here, or veranda, is what George likes to call it, which I think sounds kind of sexy. And then this right here is the LA, and then we have a lower plaza here. And then the space in the middle where all the softness is, where all the greenery is primarily focused, and there'll be grass for people to sit on, kind of helps to divide those spaces. So one of these spaces could be closed down, people could use it, while the public is still accessing the other spaces. And what we've done too is we've created lots of permeability through the spaces, but we've also created these points where if, like, say there's a wedding down here, right? There could be, this could be roped off, and that wedding party can happen, and people can still walk up the LA and enter the Winter Garden and access these restaurants up here. And what this does too is this provides potential additional business for any restaurants that may locate up here and would be the ones that maybe cater that wedding, right? So that's just a scenario to put out there. This is a view looking from the corner in through the plaza up to the Winter Garden. This is not a final, rendering, but it's intended to give you the feel of what it will be like as you're entering into the plaza. And then lighting, I have a photometric plan, and then I have the fixtures in there. And I'll quickly explain where all the fixtures are and what you should pay attention to on the photometric plan. This photometric plan does show all these little dots are actually like foot candles, so you can see how many foot candles are falling on the ground at any of those places. But these magenta lines are really the extent of the throw of those light fixtures. So the main thing here is that we are not throwing light, over on Jesse's yard, right? All the light is focused here. So the light is going to be kept within the footprint of the project, except of course these ones right here, these are actually the city fixtures that we're going to be using, and they are intended to throw light down onto the street as well. So these are the city fixtures that will basically be all around the perimeter of the site. They're, I think, about 15 feet high. They have a traditional look to them with the acorn lamp. The great thing about lighting is that just because this is all glass does not mean that the light's going to throw up. So the actual luminaire that we're going to use is going to focus all that light down. All the light on the site will be at 3,000 Kelvin, which is more of a warm light. So we're not going to do like 5,000 Kelvin, which is cold. 3,000 Kelvin for the light across the site is going to be what is used. These are the colored light that's intended for the plaza. This light, it's not going to be like Vegas, so it is going to be something that's gentle and soft on most days, but it gives the opportunity if the city has an event. We were talking about maybe a winter solstice event as something that's a counterpoint to the summer solstice that can happen in this plaza. Then we can light up the plaza in blue and, violet and lavender and magenta or whatever. This light is all focused right here in the center of the plaza. So there'll be fixtures that focus down on the center of the plaza and create pools of light. These are the bollards that will be used mostly on the Paseo. So along the Paseo here, there'll be bollards that point light down on the path. No light will go up, so it's really kind of subdued as we get back there towards the single-family residential. There'll be bollards along these paths, and at these points here. These are pedestrian light fixtures that have the option of having like a bollard attachment at the bottom. These lights will be on the interior section of the street here. So those lights, again, will just throw the light down on the drive that goes through the site. What we decided to for this additional street we're cutting through, we want that to feel like part of the city grid, so we're going to use the acorns here. I forgot to mention that. So the acorns will go on this portion right here as well. And then this light is what's intended for all the benches in the plaza. So going back to like here, underneath these seating walls and underneath these seating walls on the islands, that light will be, not this is like a curvy picnic table, but under here and under here, that light will be kind of emanating from underneath the seat, so it'll provide a soft, warm glow that kind of highlights the perimeter of the lower portion of the plaza. These are lights that are intended just for the LA. There'll be soft lights that are white, that are strung up in the branches of the trees, and they'll have a very slow, soft, they'll kind of go off and on a little bit, but not like your Christmas tree does, just real soft, so it kind of mimics if the wind's blowing and the branches are blocking your view of a light. And then we have these lights in case we need them anywhere where stairs are, and we want to wash the stairs with lights so people don't trip. And then the intention for the building facade is to be really subtle with the lighting, so only on certain portions of the building facade do we intend to do just some gentle uplighting of the brick. And that brings us to the end.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And as thorough and long as that was, thank you for the brief summary of everything that's here.
You got it. I know, right? Like, that's like maybe 40 minutes for 99 pages. How much is that a page? Like 30 seconds?
Good.
Yeah.
It's not bad. So any comments from the city at this time? Or you gonna-
Yeah, we can go through our comments now.
Okay. You want this thing?
Mr. Chair, just a few things to review. As part of this, your final PD approval does include these items, which are included in the packet and Greg went over. These items would be made part of that PD rezoning, which is very specific to this plan. So the precise setbacks for this project, the finalized heights, the lot coverage, the use groups, the vehicle circulation, the landscape and streetscape plan, the lighting plan, and the parking plan are all tied to the zoning of this site. So any modifications to those would have to come back before Planning Commission or Architectural Board of Review. Any major modifications would have to go through the whole process again. So this is setting the zoning for that site. The minimums of the uses are driven by the development and use agreement, so it isn't necessary to set those minimums as part of the zoning. Per the development and use agreement, the commercial use has a minimum of 100,000 square feet combined of office and retail space, with no less than 35,000 square feet of office space and 25,000 square feet of retail space. For the residential use component, there's no less than 100,000 square feet or 140 residential units, whichever is less required per the development and use agreement. There are a few notes that we would want you to consider as part of the approval or recommendation for approval. The first is the community gathering space. We were presented with a lot of details of the design and circulation today, but your approval is specifically for the use of the 1/2 acre of property as a first-class multifunctional community gathering space available for public use, and the green space associated with that plan, that urban open space, and not the specifics of the design, which is still being worked on with ABR. The outdoor dining is something that would return to Planning Commission as a future request as part of 1161. As a condition or as just as a note of approval, we would want to state that the applicant may exceed the maximum percentage of seats allowable on a case-by-case basis depending on the retail use in the outdoor dining areas that they specified as part of the plan. So this would provide just a little bit more flexibility, but also give Planning Commission the purview to hold them to that percentage or go a little bit over. Lot consolidation would come at a future Planning Commission meeting as part of the PD process. The final PD approval will be sent to ABR, so that is part of the process. It can be a condition if you'd like to set that. And then also as part of the O&M plan, which is required by the development and use agreement, tree maintenance can be included if that is a desired condition as part of this, which would enhance the site.
So a quick question then. This packet that we have, and we've gotten iterations before, it's been updated. We got even some today, including at this meeting. This would be essentially, if you took a lawyer's equivalent, this would be like the legislative history and all the background to a statute that's passed. We only passed the statute that's what's before us, but this is sort of like the supporting supplemental material for what we had before us to determine.
That's correct. Yeah, the guiding PowerPoint slide, Caitlin, if you can go back one, I believe, maybe two.
That's what
are these specific topics. And to be clear, these are summarized topics as defined in Chapter 1156. Right. But these are the topics that are in front of the commission with the supporting documents that you have in front of you.
Very good. And did I cut you off? Did you have another slide or anything?
No, that is all.
Okay, very good. Any initial comments or questions for the applicant or for the city from the commission?
Mr. Chair, the one question I have is the parking garage. You know, I think you did a good job of laying out the spaces and what's on each floor, but you said the 100 spaces for the public. Is that gonna, where that's at, which floor it's on, is that gonna be dependent on the uses in the buildings? Or are they going to be on the first floor, I guess is the question.
My understanding, and Mark is here with me, but most people that are going to be using the retail spaces will access from that street that we've created. And so they will primarily access the winter garden and the retail from the first and second floor. So those public spaces will be at the max on the second floor.
Mr. Baker and to members of the commission, that was an item that we worked out in the development agreement as well. And the concept behind that was the idea that you didn't necessarily have to come to the site to park. If you were going to Geiger's or another downtown district, or frankly, even a visitor of a neighbor on Marlowe and Bell can have access to this garage as well.
Just a question for Greg. The Curtis block, Curtis building, the height isn't specifically called out in your diagram. Is that assumed that there's no addition at this point planned?
Correct. We're still reviewing that, and we're going to be reviewing that with the Architectural Board of Review, God bless you, as things move forward. God bless you.
That's a designated landmark as well, right? So there's that whole process to go through for any additions.
Yeah, any modifications, in fact, the design of that space is required to get what's called a certificate of appropriateness from the Architectural Board of Review.
Any other comments or questions at this time?
I have a question for planning staff. So since a private public area is not regulated in the zoning code currently under conditional uses, do you recommend that we add a condition regarding hours of operation for the public square? Or is it the intent that it be open 24 hours a day for the public?
That is a great question. Can you allow me some time to think through that, maybe as we have some
Definitely.
dialogue?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but let me take a pause and think through that a little bit. Same thing back to you, Monica. Any thoughts there? Let's circle back to that maybe in a few minutes. It's a great thought.
With that, then, I invite the members of the public who wish to speak on this issue to please come forward. Many of you have been here several times. Come on up. If you are going to speak, please sign in and tell us where you live and what your comments are. And the chair has the privilege of recognizing Master Cruson as, I think, the youngest commenter that we have ever had at the Planning Commission.
I'm Sam Carlson, 1550 St. Charles Avenue. And you could put festivals, races, and rocks to climb on, water, bike racks.
Thank you very much for those comments, and we look forward to seeing you here again.
She has something to add. You don't want to? Do you want me to say it for you? Okay. Belle Cruson wanted to add a note. She was wondering if you could have a play area for little kids, like her little brother, to play in as well in the plaza.
Very good. Thank you. Is that a drawing we need to receive into the record?
Yeah, make that part of the record.
Very good. With great joy, we received that. Thank you very much for your comments and your participation. All right, top that one, Jesse.
Jesse Shedden, 1488 Marlowe. Just two quick comments and requests for, conditions on the approval. One being with the traffic study. I think a lot of it is not necessarily about volume, especially on Marlowe. It's just about the safety of a couple of those intersections. And so the condition I would ask for is that we do a comprehensive traffic study a year after completion of the project, or within a year, whatever, when really everything is done and we see the traffic patterns at that point, to have a traffic study at that time done. The other condition, and it's been great working with Carnegie and RDL. I just like a condition as far as the southern border to make sure that where we've talked about screening the backyards to the townhomes, that we do see that with a full screening to the backyards up to the houses. So that was it.
Thank you very much. I think on the specifics of the screening will actually be captured by ABR and the maintenance of that, and by the maintenance agreement on the trees and other plantings, correct? Because we've talked about the importance of that at this commission, but the formal approval of that would be in those bodies.
Correct.
I think you could consider specifically calling out that southern section as a part of the O&M plan, but just something to think about, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Ben Hockenhall, 1492 Marlowe. I just want to say that in general, I'm happy with how this has developed, and I don't really have any significant concerns, but I do have one question at this point. So I realize that there's going to be approvals for the overall plan development, but how do opportunities for redress get handled if, as this is being developed and details are being constructed, that issues arise? How do we actually deal with those kinds of questions?
It's a good question. I'll take my shot at it, but thank you for your question. Specifically, where there's any other approval that's going to be required, just as this sets the zoning for the site and the minimums that were on that list that were in front of us, that the code gives to the Planning Commission. If there are other details like signs or other issues that are in there that would go to some other approval within the city, building code, signs, those processes still will go forward. Just like outdoor dining will come back if there's a question there, and other things will come back. But so this is as if it was being rezoned to something, from residential to commercial, commercial to residential. This is setting those broad strokes. Other approvals may and likely will be necessary as the process goes on.
Real quick, Mr. Chair, I can directly answer that. Ben, in Chapter 1156, there's two specific sections that address. They're more framed around modifications. There's what's defined as minor modifications, which in the code is defined as anything that's not a major modification. And a major modification is the addition of property to the plan development, or the addition to an already approved final PD plan that would change the mix of uses. The major modification would essentially have to go through the City Council, Planning Commission, ABR process from the start to finish. A minor modification would come just in front of ABR or Planning Commission. So let's come up with an example. One of the floors of the office building, it goes from 6 to 5. Or a major material change comes in after they value engineer the project, or something like that. It would have to come back before the ABR, and depending on the topic, potentially the Planning Commission.
Any other comments on this item, please? If anybody else wants to come, you don't have to wait. You can queue up behind, and we'll all be ready to roll.
My name is Stephen Lamantia. I've been very impressed by what I've seen today, and I just have one question. In the parking plan, I did not see any provision for an electric vehicle charging station. I wonder if any thought has been given to including electric vehicle charging stations within the project.
We've been talking about them, so they're being considered.
They're being considered. Okay, well, I hope you will consider it very, very seriously. Just a few statistics about that. The Ford Motor Company Sustainability Officer predicts that within 5 to 6 years, the cost of ownership of a conventional automobile will exceed that of an electrical vehicle. The Honda Motor Company in Marysville, Ohio, has announced it's going to be closing down one of its lines, assembly lines, this summer, so that it can convert it to produce electrical vehicles. The engineers interviewed at the National Auto Show pointed out that within a very short time, the battery technology has advanced so quickly for electric vehicles that they should be charged within a half an hour, and they should have a range that's almost double of what they have now. The AAA did a recent survey that showed 20% of respondents said they plan to replace their conventional vehicle with an electric vehicles. And industry experts, according to the internet, predict that within 25 years, at least 30% of automobiles will be electronic vehicles. And just, if you're not aware, the city of Lakewood has only 2 charging stations at this point. One is a fast charge station, one is I guess, a conventional station. I don't know that much about the technology behind them, but I do know that part of the rationale behind putting them in place was to help make Lakewood a contemporary city, but also because we have so many renters that do not have a place to charge their cars. People that buy properties here, they can have that installed within their parking garage, and you may offer that as an amenity, but those that are renters, they'll be searching for spots. So I just wanted to reinforce my suggestion here. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Can you tell us where, I don't think you mentioned your address, Stephen?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2164 Arthur.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else on this matter? Okay, we'll close public comment on this matter. I guess I'll ask the commission for any initial thoughts or discussion about how we want to approach this. I'll make my comments. This is the most extraordinarily detailed, thorough, fully vetted proposal in my 5 years that I've been on, 5.5 years I've been on the Planning Commission. The level of iteration and engagement and evolution of this is extraordinary, and you're all to be commended. In the very first meeting, people were very, very upset and concerned with, and to be at this stage with this level of detail of a project where the comments are, you know, how many charging stations and making sure trees are in place is extraordinary. So I want to compliment everybody involved. It's really heartwarming, frankly. Anyone else, specifics to how to proceed?
Just to echo the chair's comments, I wish all of the things before us were like this. But it's really, it shows you the best of Lakewood. I mean, kind of the camaraderie between the development team and the developers, the development team and the neighbors, and kind of them taking their suggestions into account has really come up with a great product. And I drop my kid off at daycare across the street every day, and I'm excited to see how this site transforms. And I think it's going to change downtown Lakewood for the next century.
I'd echo those comments as well. I commend the city just for your leadership and working so closely with the developer and the community and really making sure this is a product that we want here in Lakewood. I just have 2 quick suggestions, I guess, to consider as moving forward. One would be for the 4 parking spaces that you had identified in the rear that border the apartment building. Just a recommendation, anytime you try to parallel park along a curved street like that, it's extraordinarily difficult. You wind up with one wheel touching the curb and the other wheel 24 inches off the curb. You know, it would be really nice to see that curb line kind of straightened out a little bit to make parallel parking in those spaces a little bit easier to do. Second comment would be for the plaza, as you continue work through the ABR, my son kind of brought up the idea of climbing rocks. He had that idea from the Van Aken district. They put out some big boulders out front. There may be an opportunity, in the grassy grove here in the corner to put just some element. It's not a formal play structure per se, but just some organic, boulders on the site for kids to play around and climb around on at events, So those would be two specific recommendations to further explore as you develop the plan.
I guess it's my turn. I usually have a million questions floating around in my head, and I guess the fact that the only question I have is regarding the hours that the public plaza will be accessible to the public is a sign of your responsiveness to the Planning Commission and the planning staff, so job well done.
So, Mr. Chair, and Monica, on the hours of operation, the developer and the city are required to agree on an operations and maintenance agreement for the entire project. It will include the plaza. So I'm wondering if we can establish hours of operations of use inside the operations and maintenance agreement as a condition tonight, if that could be acceptable.
Well, I think just practically speaking, we can note that, establish that along with the, it's already in the notes that are before us as potential approval with the trees maintenance, that could be added. We could add that as we have approval notes there on the last one.
Mr. Chair, can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I noticed that at the last bullet point, it says tree maintenance, and I wanted to see if maybe you could be more broad and include just landscaping maintenance, since there are other elements of landscaping other than trees, just to make sure that everything on the site is taken care of properly.
Any other discussion?
Just a quick question for
There's
the
no
city.
motion on the floor, but yeah, go ahead.
Is security a component of the O&M plan? Is that something that's going to be negotiated as far as how security on the site works?
Yes. Yeah, and frankly, we're going to take a big lead from the developer on that. Chief of Police, Chief Malley, will be involved in just accessibility around the site and responding to emergency situations. So it'll be the Carnegie team's designers and their public safety team kind of meeting with Chief Malley and our police officers and firefighters to kind of come up with, kind of the emergency response. So that'll be tied to that plan too.
And Mr. Chair, one of the comments was about, the distinction between traffic volume and traffic safety. And I think if you look at the hospital site, maybe there wasn't as much pedestrian traffic kind of like coming from other areas into the site, whereas now this mix of uses is going to create a lot of pedestrian kind of in and out traffic, right? So I'm curious as to maybe the city's or the staff suggestion on the traffic study, a year after substantial completion or something like that, to kind of see if there are, and I don't know that we would tie it to the PD approval, but maybe a recommendation that the city explore it, because, there may be other traffic calming things that can be done in and around the site to help some of those issues if there are problems.
The city is comfortable with a traffic study 1 year after completion of the project. I'd offer Rick or Jonathan or Mark or Greg to respond if you guys would like. Additionally, the administration's focused on traffic calming in general, on Franklin, and then particularly our focus on Marlowe. We're still figuring out what and how that can shape itself. We learned a lot from our engagement on Woodward, both negative and positive on the chicanes that were installed. And so we're learning from that experience and are soon going to be reaching out to the broader street of Marlowe to figure out how we might be able to manage a plan moving forward. So to address the second question, Mr. Baker, the traffic calming outside of this project remains a major focus of the administration. Greg or Mark, I don't know if you guys have any comments, or Jonathan or Chris, on traffic study post-development.
So we've discussed that, and we're amenable to a traffic study a year after. And the rocks and everything else we've talked about.
Oh, they just left.
Well, normally you get to, answer the questions, but I think, was that your son?
Yeah, I was missing.
He's cute. But he'll have a good time playing there. We'll put rocks in.
The formal motion would be a recommendation, a motion for recommendation to the planning, or the planning commissioner, or the planning director to approve the PD, subject to the approval notes that we have on screen. So I will go ahead and try to,
Well, before you do that, let me just suggest, did you want to make a comment about traffic
If I could make, just a.
before we do that, so we,
Yeah, in response to a follow-up study, I guess I just wanted to clarify that the same level of detail and effort that went into this one, very thorough, wouldn't be needed a year after full development to identify if we're within the confines of the study. So we could do some follow-up counts to show if the traffic volumes that were projected are occurring, or if it's a little bit higher, a little bit lower. It seems like the comment was based more on a safety feature on the streets rather than like an intersection operation concern. We're not opposed to doing a follow-up study, but I guess I'd work with planning to determine the level of effort and saying that you could get the answer you need without that big book that I got sitting over there on the desk, updating that.
one way to do that before you craft your motion, Mr. Baker, is a traffic analysis to be acceptable to the city, I guess is the way to do it. So you don't, it doesn't have to be a full formal study. It can be an update. It might focus more on safety, et cetera. So.
so if you could go back to the slide with the recommendations so that I have my notes, they are. So I would go ahead and put together a motion to make a recommendation to the planning director to approve the plan development, subject to the notes on screen, which would be the community gathering space, would be a multifunctional community gathering space available for public use of a ½ acre, and that the final design of that space be approved by ABR, as well as everything else in the plan development process. That outdoor dining, I guess as part of the PD recommendations, say that, we'll likely see outdoor dining applications in front of us, and some of those might exceed the seat recommendations in the code. Also, that the lot be consolidated at a later point. The recommendation of final PD approved by ABR, and then the O&M plan between the city and developer include landscape and tree maintenance, as well as site border maintenance, and that a traffic analysis be completed a year after substantial completion of the project. Did I get that up?
Motion's been made, and I would gladly second that, and salute your note-taking and got it all in. So, the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Well, then, we will.
The hours of operation? Do you want to add?
Oh, I will amend the motion that the O&M plan include hours of operation for the public, for all public spaces. Or I guess I would define it to the ½ acre multifunctional gathering space.
Can we add the rain garden, or not the rain garden, the winter garden too?
And the
Since
winter
it's-
garden?
Since it's a public space.
Yep.
So I'll second the amended motion. Any further discussion? Well, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No opposed. Congratulations, thank you. We wish you the very best of luck in the rest of this process, and hope you get lots of great tenants, and we look forward to this to being a reality. Thank you very much. Good luck. Okay, we will move on to our next docket item, which is docket number 030519, Lake Avenue Homes, Plan Development. The applicant, please come forward, or?
We can do it a quick intro. Maybe go back to the you don't mind, I can run them through that. I'll keep going, you're good. So, Mr. Chair, I think we're just trying to pull up the current plan set. Just wanted to take a moment to introduce this project. Similarly, from the One Lakewood Place site, to introduce the WXZ and Dimmitt architecture team back in front of the Planning Commission. This project is being reviewed under the Plan Development Code. Tonight, we just wanted to put up a simple agenda for this particular docket item. We're shortly going to hear from WXZ and Dimmitt on the updates that have been made since they were received their preliminary plan approval vote in March with the Planning Commission. The city has done some analysis that it'd like to work through in the neighborhood and some of the code analysis. We're then going to turn it open to the Planning Commission for questions and feedback, then open it up for public comment and questions. On this one, we'll we'll make all the notes and questions as public comment comes in. We'll close public comment, and then we'll work towards the discussion on those comments. The city is likely going to have answers to those. We'll invite WXZ and the Dimmitt team back up to answer those questions, and then the consideration of a vote at the end.
Very good.
The quick process, Mr. Chair, just for everybody that's here tonight. This project was introduced to City Council on March 4th of this year. It was first heard by the Planning Commission on March 7th. At that meeting, it received its preliminary approval. It has also received an approval from the Architectural Board of Review, specifically on the design and architecture of the project per Chapter 1156.05 and all the guidelines that are established in that section. And then they're back in front of the Commission tonight for its final approval. This project is required to go back to City Council and receive its final vote, a consideration of a vote, to rezone the property. So it's a preliminary vote by the Planning Commission, one vote by the Architectural Board of Review, a third vote required by the Planning Commission, and then ultimately it would have to go to City Council. So the request is the same as the last docket item, which is making a recommendation to the director to approve with conditions, or deny the application based on its compliance with Chapter 1156. The other option is defer the item if that were to come up tonight. I wanted to spend just one quick minute reorienting us with the purpose section of the plan development chapter, and specifically some sections under 1156.01 that talk about the purpose, which is developments that offer pedestrian-friendly site design, energy efficiency, industry best practices, accommodation of a range of compatible land uses through appropriate site design, and projects that promote a variety of housing types. It targets projects that are compact, pedestrian-scaled, providing greater efficiencies in the use of infrastructure, and recognizing new market demand for new residential and commercial development within compact, pedestrian-friendly districts. So just with that introduction, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over to the Dimmitt team to walk us through the updates to the plans, and we may need just a couple minutes to pull up the most recent updates, I think. Sure. Our apologies.
No problem. You can state your name and address for the record, and welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Commission. My name is Paul Glowacki. I'm with Dimmitt Architects. We're located at 14414 Detroit Avenue. We're actually right down the road on Marlow and Detroit, so we're going to be watching that last project go up right across the street. So we're very excited for that one as well. So
excellent. I had that issue trying to download that too.
So as Bryce mentioned, the first time we were here was back in March, beginning of March, and we've had a couple months to meet with the ABR. A couple of times we've gotten that final approval. We've had some very good conversations, both with the city, with residents through those meetings, and the plan has really evolved from that first plan that we showed to you, and we want to kind of walk through those today, but I want to note some of the major items that came out of that first meeting with the Planning Commission, and I think the major concerns they had essentially were 6 of them. The plan in terms of the setbacks on both the front and back of the site, landscaping around the site, traffic, of course, and some just vehicular movement internal to the site. And we really do feel like we've addressed all those. We've addressed the neighbors' concerns, and I'll walk you through kind of some of those major items that we revised. So here's the original plan that we showed to you. This was actually from the ABR, so there are a couple updates in here, but predominantly the original plan that we showed to the team. And I think one of the notable things to kind of see as we go through this plan is the reconfiguration of the back unit, what we called Unit C here, and how that kind of works through the Unit A and B on the west portion of the site. So this is the reconfiguration of the site. This is a pretty large aerial view, and what I'll kind of focus on here is notably the western A unit. And you can see how that really, one of the major concerns was how far that unit is sticking out into kind of the setbacks from the neighboring properties. And so in being able to kind of refigure that back unit, that Unit C, we were able to pull the AB block on the west side back. I'm going to jump to a larger scale plan so we can kind of take a little bit more notice of the details here. Again, here's the original plan, and the big thing that we did here, and this really was working with ABR, was to really reconfigure the Unit C floor plan, both in plan and also in massing, and you'll see that as we kind of go through some of the elevations, renderings, and that sort of thing, how that reconfiguration really helps out the site, the setbacks on the north and the south, its relationship to the neighboring properties, and you can really see what we did here is we took that Unit C, we kind of stretched it a lot longer than it was before and made it more shallow so that we could pull the A and B unit on the west back. The A unit previously was about 5 foot closer to the lot line on the south there, so we pulled that A-B block back 5 feet. And really, it's kind of down to a minimal dimension now from the C unit, the separation between those two buildings. And really what our focus was, and kind of pressed by ABR, was this existing brick wall that runs around the entirety of the site. You can see on the left-hand side there, the existing brick wall has a kind of a big pillar on the corner of it. And the intent is to keep the brick wall on the site. And what we were trying to do, and I think we succeeded in doing here, is pull that entirety of that garage for that front A unit on the west side behind that brick wall, so it's really shielded behind that. And you'll see that once we get into some of the renderings. Some of the other things that we've really evolved now is the landscaping plan. We have a landscape plan here. Really worked through the muse space, that central space, to create a little bit more play between pervious, impervious, public, and private, and really getting those tenant spaces that have their own private patios to kind of have some interaction between that main space, but really create a large central space for all the units to be able to access out onto. But also, as is really kind of driven by the end user, is for them to have some private space for themselves, little patio space so they can go out and grill and really have just a little bit more privacy than kind of that public space there. The C unit also, one of the big things was we flipped the garage, and that helped us to kind of tighten that AB further back even and get, so essentially now we have the 3 units accessed on the east side of the site where previously they were on the west. And you can really see how that allows us to get that A and B building back as far as possible we can. The the C unit previously was really kind of a two-story unit with a pitched roof on it, very similar to the A units in the front in terms of its architecture. And you can see that really that two-story mass went right up to the brick wall that's on that portion of the site. That brick wall, you'll see in some of the further sections, is about 7-8 feet tall. And what we wanted to do, really in a response to concerns from the neighbors to the north, was to lessen the mass of that C building. So where it was previously about 2 feet off of the brick wall, we now have about 4 feet off the brick wall and much more space to, you'll notice there's actually a little bit of space between the brick wall and the north lot line. We've also brought down the massing of that C unit, and you'll see that in some of the sections, but really created more space, not only on the south portion of the site with the A unit to the sidewalk, but the C unit to the back of the property as well. Just so you have them, some blown up dimensions here. Again, we're about 6 feet off of the north lot line now at that C unit, where it really kind of has more of the mass, and then the garage portion, which is the tightest, the garage is only 1 story tall, so really trying to get the massing of that unit down to address concerns of privacy to the neighbor to the north, but also just the massing in the site. You can see the dimensions around the drive. We kind of walk through with our template to get some understanding of how those drivers are going to get in and out of there. On the northwest portion of the site, in the last ABR meeting, we had a couple of open parking spaces, so for visitors, and it was noted that really with Lake Avenue having the parking there, that was not necessary, and it also brings in somebody that's not used to the site. These are people who are going to park in their garages every day. They're going to understand how to get in and out of the site, but it also allowed us to get kind of a larger backup space for that northwest B unit. We have a little bit more room on the west portion of the site for the C to get out. There's 26 foot to the wall, and we're showing 2 dimensions there. One is to the wall and one is to the lot line, just so you can get an understanding of the unit to the property, but also the vehicular access throughout there. As I noted, the Unit A on the west portion of the site there, we got an extra 5 feet. We pulled that back 5 feet off of the lot line from where it was previously. And I think the nice thing that happens is you still have that kind of stepping from east to west back, which is kind of continuous along Lake Avenue as you go either to the east or the west of this property. We're also showing here, we did some quick calculations on the perviousness of the site. Obviously, the site currently is a gas station, and so it's approximately 85% non-pervious at this time. We are going to have 30% pervious, so essentially green space, and then also an extra 10% beyond that of semi-pervious, and that's kind of that area in that central muse space that's shown as like kind of the green checkerboard pattern to allow for kind of some softness in that internal space. This is a landscape plan. Kind of all of this is shown on our site plan, but notably some pretty large trees in that main front lawn. And then as you kind of work into the site, it becomes much more residential in nature with a couple of trees that are going to be in a planter type element central to that muse space. But then along the muse space, kind of a play and scale. So there's a little bit of privacy created by some of the landscaping, but also some lower level stuff that'll create some nice scale as it moves up towards the residences. Pretty good mix of plants and trees. So we'll have not only just a mix of scale, but a mix of color, flowering times. So really, I think it's going to be a very, very nicely landscaped property, essentially throughout the year. So we're still working on our photometrics plan, and I apologize, we don't have that yet, but I just want to note that really the fixtures that we're proposing are very residential in nature, very much in the taking their cues from the architecture, so very craftsman in style. And you can see really the major lighting that we have is some bollard lighting that's down that central muse space, so essentially just to light that footpath back to the residences. And then you'll notice a green dot at each of the front porches, and really that's going to be a hanging fixture that'll be on those porches. They're actually going to have kind of an open architecture underneath the porches, and so those will kind of hang down there, and then showing a light on either side of the garage door that's similar in aesthetics to kind of get some safety lighting to the garage doors. Again, please note the brick wall around the site is really going to stop a lot of light transfer, and these fixtures are really not going to throw light onto the neighboring property. But we will have that photometrics submitted to the city. So this, and I wanted to show the plan because I think we've kind of walked through the A and B plans previously. But the C unit, the floor plan is pretty integral to how we're reacting to ABR's comments, the Planning Commission's comments, to the neighbors' comments. And what you can really see is on kind of to the slide bottom, the floor plans, that's really kind of out to that muse space. So you have your front porch, you have your major living spaces, the master bedroom to the left, the living room, a dining room. And then once you go further into the floor plan, when you're kind of looking north of the property, we have really a lot of the more private elements, bathrooms, closets, the kitchen, really to kind of alleviate having any real major views off of the property. That's really the same on the second floor, where the bedrooms are to the south of the unit and the bathrooms are to the north. So just as much as we wouldn't want to be looking out on somebody else's property, those spaces are really not intended to be looked into with bathrooms there. One very notable thing in the section is that we really kind of tried to focus the mass of that unit out to the muse space, and by kind of doing an asymmetrical roof section to bring the scale of the back of the house down. So you can see it's pretty low eave in the back of the house, and you can see actually the brick wall there. I believe it's 7 feet to the neighboring property, and we're looking about 8.5 feet to our side of the property. So really, the small amount of windows, or the kind of the one patio door that accesses off of the living room, is actually almost going to be completely covered by that brick wall. So not really any views to the north there. We are showing kind of a tree line on the north side of that wall. That is still a discussion that we're having with the city, with the neighbors, but something that the client offered up to really help mitigate the concerns of the neighbors there. These really haven't changed the elevations of the front units, so I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly. This is the internal muse space, so the elevations you see. Now, this is the old elevation. One of the big concerns that ABR had was kind of the design of that lower unit in terms of the massing, how tall it is. It really didn't seem to fit the architecture of the rest of the site, and so we really took a good look at that and brought the scale of that down, brought through some of the architectural elements from the A and B units that are fronting Lake Avenue, but really to kind of try to step down the scale of the homes as you come from Lake internal to the muse space, knowing that space is a little bit tighter, to have a little bit more of a kind of that pedestrian scale brought down in there. This is the C unit in the back. Again, I think this really shows kind of a good visual of the neighboring property's view of the back of this house. You'll notice in that upper left-hand elevation, there's a line that's kind of going across there, that black line. That would be the height of that brick wall on the north side of the property. And then you can see in the side elevations, again, that brick wall is pretty tall there. And again, bringing that massing down as much as we possibly can, but still allowing some light into that unit with some dormers up high. These are the previous drive aisle sections. I think one really notable thing is if you look on the top, to the right of the top elevation, that was the previous C unit, and this is now the new C unit. So obviously the garage is in front of it, but you can really see the scale difference from that unit, what we had previously, to what we're proposing now. So we've updated the renderings, obviously, for the setbacks, but for the architecture internal to the site as well. This is the Lake Avenue view, kind of looking straight down that muse space. So you see the planters with the trees down the muse space. And then it's kind of hard to see in this rendering, but the left unit, the west unit, being kind of pushed back further now. Still proposing, and is approved by the ABR, the same architecture that we were looking at previously in terms of materials and scale of details and that sort of thing. This is looking from the southeast towards the northwest on Lake, and then the opposite way. And again, we're really kind of note that brick wall. You can see the pier with the round ball on top of it. Really trying to push that out. Push that unit back as far as possible so that we can hide the garage of that unit. This is the previous view of the internal muse space before we had our landscape architect on board, and notably that large blue townhouse element really brought the scale of that down, so it doesn't feel so oppressive in that space. One thing to note is we have not had this rendering updated, but on the site plan, you'll notice we took out that middle planter box at the request of the ABR, just to kind of open that space up more to give it a little bit more room for residents. Again, that view looking the other way there. Just some architectural elements, and I don't really have to go into any detail on these because it's really not Planning Commission, but just to kind of talk about the details that we're looking at. And again, these have all been I think we sent these to the ABR, so. And I believe that's everything. We did submit a traffic study as well. Again, that's kind of a pre and post, and so those numbers, are obviously drastically better now that it's not a gas station. It's 5 homes, so those numbers have gone down, pretty dramatically. And I think that's all we had submitted.
Good, thank you very much. Any further comments from the city?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have a few slides that we just wanted to work through and then open it up for initial comments and questions from the commission, and then we'll open it up for public comment, if that's okay.
Very good.
Thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, similar to the past approval, the final PD approval would include the precise setbacks for each of these units, the final heights for all of the units, which is in the packet, the lot coverage percentage of the buildings, the defined use as residential for these homes, the vehicle circulation, the landscape plans, and the lighting plan for the site. So these are all of the elements that would become part of the zoning and unable to be modified without approval by ABR and Planning Commission, and potentially Council too, if it's a major modification. Just to give some background on the plan development timeframe, once this is approved by Council, there are 2 years for the developer to act on it. After those 2 years are up, if there's not significant process, the PD plan automatically lapses and becomes null and void, and that zoning of that parcel would not be legitimate anymore. So it would have to come before the board to be reheard. As I mentioned, any modification to the final PD plans, if it's a minor modification, it would have to be reviewed by the Commission and Architectural Board of Review. That would be a change in materials after the materials had been approved, or a minor landscape detail. A major modification like adding a story to the house or changing the setbacks or changing the use of the site, would have to go through this process again, which is a 5-step process with the commission, architectural board of review, and city council. So any major modification to the plans or future modification, if something happened to the building, would have to go through this process again. History of the site, 1927 Sanborn map shows that this was a gas station long before the homes were there. So it's a existing non-conforming use in an R1M single family medium density district. This is the existing site. There's currently 2 curb cuts at about 30 feet across, more than 30 feet across, accessing the auto mechanics shop and the gas station. As it was shown, the existing setbacks from the front, the building line setback is 19 feet on the west, 24 feet on the east. This is to the open front porch. To the buildings themselves, it's about 30 feet, 16 feet from the side yard and 15 feet, and then 5 feet from the rear for that 2-story portion of the building. All of the buildings are just under or at the 35 feet, which is the maximum for a residential district, and fit within that surrounding zoning for height. As part of the code review in 115602A, the past use of the site and the zoning of the abutting properties should be considered as part of your approval. The existing use, being a gas station and auto mechanic shop, is an existing non-conforming use in this neighborhood and as part of that zoning district, with the zoning of the abutting properties being single-family, medium-density residential. The proposed use of 5 single-family homes is more conforming with the district as a use. So as a precedent, if a home had at least 10,000 square feet and was going to 5 residential districts, that would become less conforming with the use. But this is becoming more conforming in this neighborhood with the existing use being a gas station and auto mechanic repair shop. In 115603, it states that the PD shall comply with the setbacks from adjoining residential uses. Any deviations from that would need to fall under the commission finding that the deviation is solely for the purpose of promoting an integrated site plan that is consistent with the community vision. Some of the vision goals that we feel apply to this site is the variety of housing types that include seniors. These are first floor master units, which are hard to find in Lakewood. We have been losing a lot of people to other communities that are able to build new first floor masters, and encouraging new and infill development, which is complementary to the scale and character of surrounding residential uses. Looking at the side yard setbacks and looking 500 feet in either direction, the approximate building to building side yard setbacks is about 12 feet on average. So these do provide adequate side yard setbacks. Looking at the rear yard setbacks, home to home, building to building, about looking in five houses in either direction, the average is 107 feet. These backyard setbacks are 113 building to building, 96 building to building, and 83 building to building for that 1 floor portion of the garage. Like the applicant stated, there has been a lot of work on that rear unit to help it better comply and improve the privacy for the unit, the house behind it. So they have lowered the grade a bit in the rear to increase the height of the wall according to the first floor of the unit. They've worked to put the bathrooms in this portion with the dormers so that these windows would be opaque and not necessarily something people are looking through daily. And they've worked on the roof structure, the roof line, to reduce the mass of that building. Looking at the legal setbacks in the area, along Lake, the building line setback is 50 feet. So this would be increasing the building line by approximately 30 feet in some areas, and then 48 to 24. Looking building to building, we have about 207, 181, 191, 210, so we still have a fairly significant building-to-building setback. Looking up and down the corridor for examples of this so we can start to visualize what it would look like. This is a 35-foot front setback in a 50-foot building line map area. This is an example just to the east of Lakewood Park where we have a building projecting out 20 feet in front of the house next to it with a 55-foot setback and then a 35-foot setback from the right-of-way. Another example on the north of the street, just to the east of Homewood, we have a set of units that step forward, some by 7 feet, this one by 15 feet, and that is mid-block, and then this unit is 30 feet away from the right-of-way. So looking at the site that we are looking at the plans for today, we have a 48-foot setback to the house to the east of the site. The front porches would fall approximately where these trees are currently located. These trees are 20 feet off the property line, so those porches would be right at those trees. And then the house would be an additional distance back. So at this corner, the house is 31 feet away from the right-of-way. So it would be about a 20-foot, 17-foot distance from this house's front. Again, looking at the two trees that are in front currently, that is approximately where the porches would fall, the open porches, and then the building portion behind that. And another view from the sidewalk, approximately 54 feet to the house to the west, and then using the existing trees as reference, approximately 19 feet to the porch of the west unit and 26 feet 8 inches to the house. So one thing we wanted to note as well, in the site plan that was shown today, which we believe there has been a modification to, but they did not show landscaping in front of this wall, and we think that is extremely important to buffer the buildings that are being proposed. So making sure that landscaping is included, and if possible, if it's possible to save these trees, we think they should make every attempt to do that because they would add buffer if it works to work with them. So, Mr. Chair, if Planning Commission was to vote on this tonight, we do have findings that we would recommend as part of this to not set a precedent for future houses, but have clear findings for this decision. As part of these findings, looking at the existing use being a gas station and auto mechanic shop, and an existing nonconformity The finding would be that the proposed use of 5 single-family homes is more conforming with the district, reduces noise and traffic volumes as shown in the traffic impact analysis for the neighborhood. The deviation from the setback of adjoining residential uses would fit within the goals of the vision, offering the first floor master units and 1-floor living that is desired by Lakewood seniors. And other goals of the vision that this fits into is the encouraging of new infill development, which is complementary to the scale and character of the surrounding residential uses, and the pedestrian-friendly site design with the reduction of traffic and the curb cut reduction. This would improve pedestrian safety along Lake where a lot of people walk. That is all I have on the analysis.
Thank you very much. Just quick procedural question. You said ABR has already approved this, or is this something, or ABR's, what's the status with ABR?
ABR has approved the project.
The project. So questions, for instance, like landscaping, a landscaping plan is not, has that been vetted through ABR? Is there a landscaping plan that's already been approved?
There is, yeah,
Okay.
and specifically related to the screening trees, I believe, I'm almost certain that that's a part of their landscaping plan. I think it was an omission on the submittal here.
So you're saying it's already approved, it's just not been, it's not depicted?
I think only specifically on those trees that Caitlin mentioned before, which border the western property line. But that's a point of clarification we can bring up.
Okay.
But yes, ABR's approval did include a full landscape plan.
And then the lighting question, that's also already been approved. A photometric study is still forthcoming in support of the lighting plan? Was that, but that's an ABR already approved item, it's not specifically before us.
Correct. And the item that's very important on the lighting plan is specifically the photometric study that shows 0-foot candle onto any other abutting property, adjacent property. It's not only an ABR requirement, but it's a requirement of the building department, so we can't issue permits unless we have fully vetted photometric studies.
Any initial comments or questions from commission members? Hearing none, then we will open this up for public comment. I first want to say I want to thank everybody who submitted written comments. We asked for them. We appreciate written comments. We're able to digest them as they come in or over time. I've read them all. I have the packet here. And so I want to thank everybody who has done that. Anybody else who wants to comment on that, please come forward, sign in. We would very much like to hear your comments this evening. If there's a number of people who want to speak, you can just line up and then you can pass the clipboard back while the first person's talking. So.
I don't know where the yellow tag is supposed to show up. Is there a yellow, you said a timing, yellow, red, and all this good stuff?
I'll start the timer so it's easier to see up there.
Make sure you have at least
We
your
used
3
to have
minutes.
that little thing working up there, and it was fun. You could watch it flip along. But anymore, keep changing things on me.
We'll use it.
I have a request. I did not receive notice, as per your rules state, for the first Architectural Review Board meeting. So if I go kind of a little bit over my yellow card, would that be okay? I'm not going to talk real loud.
Sure, please just state
Would
your
that
name and your address.
Okay, my
and-
name is Carolyn Gregory. I live at 13888 Lake Avenue, and that's next door. If I could have a plant there, good, thank you. I live in that one on the right. And I have some questions that I would like to have answered, if at all possible, tonight or whenever. Did you get you got my emails?
I have all those emails. Just a minute.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to address the density. There's questions I have with the density, it being more dense than the surrounding area at 8 units per acre within the unit, within the site versus 4 units per acre surrounding area. So it just gives you an overall concept of the density change. I'm worried about the exterior maintenance and accessibility of Unit C as this sits now. I'm wondering how that would be addressed. What about snow and leaf removal, mostly on the right-hand side there? There's just not very much room. And extra parking for the whole site. Is there going to be extra parking, and how would that be addressed? The problem is at Lake, this was brought up in another meeting, and it was said that there was ample parking on Lake, which there is, but it is restricted. When rush hour is on, there's no parking, they will haul you away. So we have restricted hours in the morning and restricted hours in the afternoon. So those are the questions I have mostly right there for density. It's like a planned development I've seen for places that are larger, that have common areas such as golf courses, swimming pools, little lakes. This is taking planned development and kind of giving it a new venue. I'm very concerned about the setbacks. We have setbacks all along the Lake Avenue at 50 to 65 feet. These setbacks are going to be 19 feet to 24 feet. And if you would look at the house on the right, Unit A, that house and half the garage is completely in front of the house on the left, the existing house on the left. That's a lot. And then, of course, it's not going to be
Keep going.
Keep going.
You can keep going.
yellow. Good Lord. It's not going to be, when you look at the site as it is now, it's going to be over. The driveways are about 33 feet wide, so it's going to come out and over, 2 of them. And how are these differences going to be resolved? I don't think they have 5 feet. Taking the houses on the west 5 feet back is now at 19 feet. It was at 14. So it's now at 19 feet, and the house on the left is still the whole house and half the garage in front of the existing structure. And it's similar to my side. It's not as bad, but it's extremely different from the rest of the street. How is that going to be resolved? Can that be resolved? That's my question. I would like to see that resolved, those differences. And the rear house being sandwiched in like that, there's problems with, as I said, exterior maintenance, accessibility, snow removal, leaf removal. How will those everyday concerns be addressed? Also, what about the car traffic? I'm sorry, I've got a cold. There's 3 garages on the right. Each one is a double. So you've got 6 cars coming in and out and in and out on that side. And you've got the narrowest part, the house between the wall. It's not the house and the boundary, it's the house and the wall, is 11 feet 10 inches. You're not going to be able to get one car passing another car in that narrow space, given that a compact sedan is 5.5 feet on average in width. And I don't think people who have these kind of homes are going to be driving compact sedans. In addition, how do you get a fire truck in there? How do you get a maintenance truck in there? How do you not block that area? So how is that going to be resolved? How are we going to resolve the traffic pattern? Right now, actually, when the Marathon Station was operative, there wasn't that much noise. I mean, this is not going to reduce the traffic or the noise or anything from over the station. The station was a nice, quiet little station. A couple more things. The remediation. Nobody has brought forward the information on remediation, and that's a big part of driving these 5 homes. If you could do it with 4 homes, is the remediation cost such that it would prohibit 4 homes and demands 5 homes? What is the cost of the remediation? What is the extent of the remediation, the area, the depth? All those things should be taken into consideration. I don't know if that's your purview. I think it is the public's need to know in order to kind of agree and go along with this plan. It says there were 2 gas stations. Well, were the tanks one on top of the other, or were they spread out? If they were on one on top of the other, then the remediation would be less. So what are the costs? What are the projected costs? What is the degree of degradation? And have alternatives been explored? We have, I've looked up, and there's an EPA which will give an assessment grant, a grant up to $350,000. They'll give you a cleanup grant up to $500,000. They've got a revolving loan from 0.1% of everybody's gas dollar goes to this 10-year, zero interest, $1 million loan. Can't go to private, though. Has to go to an NGO or a government entity. So I'm wondering why, just a few more seconds.
If you got a few more seconds, you wrap up. There are other folks who want to speak, but thank you.
I know.
Keep going.
So if we omit, could we not omit Unit C? Could we not omit Unit C? I would like to know if the developer could not omit Unit C, but of course, we've got to look at all these costs. Therefore, the setbacks would come back, the vehicle congestion would go down, the green space would increase. There's no green space here. So I'm wondering if they could even consider making the houses smaller. Okay?
Thank you very much for your comments.
Those are my questions.
Questions and comments. Thank you. And as we heard at the beginning, they're recording all the questions, writing them down here, and we'll try to answer as many as we can tonight, and we'll come back up.
If we can't answer the questions tonight, is there some way that you could vote to defer, to give this more consideration?
That's one of the things that's potentially before us. You're exactly right.
I would hope that you would consider deferring it so we can get a little more information on the remediation and the setbacks and community involvement.
And thank you for that
Thank you.
comment. Thank you.
Carolyn.
Yes, I got it. I know about 3 more steps right now. Thank you.
Anyone else preparing to comment? You can line up here. Great. And sir, when you're finished signing in, hand that clipboard to the gentleman behind you would be great. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Bob Tehasik. My husband, David Meeker, and I live at 13925 Lake Avenue. We live 2 houses west on the south side of this project. We're hoping that we have some time here to sort of deal with the conversations that still have not yet taken place in regards to the project. We were sort of informed about this project about 1.5 years ago by a city employee. So we knew something of this nature was going to possibly happen. We just didn't think it was going to be to this extent. And I apologize to that person for not believing them when they told me about this project 1.5 years ago. You know, Lake Avenue is a great avenue. It's a great boulevard. All the homes that have been built, for the most part, have been built based on consistent zoning requirements, including the gas station. Was also, the second gas station was built along those requirements. The neighborhood has a great, strong neighborhood association. About 50+% of the homes participate in that, from basically from Nicholson to Bell and Lake Avenue down to the north side of the lake. And it's kind of ironic that it took us 4 years to do street sign improvements that came out of our own pocket, but this project seems to be barreling fairly quickly in just a couple of months' time. The housing development has proposed, supposedly these houses will be 650,000 plus. I don't know what low income or what senior citizens will be able to afford a $650,000 home with, please remember, there is going to be HOA fees also associated with these homes. These homes are definitely not in line with what we consider, you know, the beauty and the sort of, you know, the neighborhood aesthetic. The developer, you know, seems to have automatically done a 5-unit, you know, plan, which it wasn't even really approved, so we have not seen any plans of anything other than the 5-unit plans. Is it necessary to have 5-unit plans? We don't feel it is, especially at $650,000. That's $2.6 million of money coming in. Certainly that should be enough to more than cover the cost of building this development. You know, people want to live here. You know, we have a great city. People want to move into the city. Developers obviously want to move into the city. And what's interesting, if I may just have a few more minutes, is that we should have the upper hand. We should be demanding from the developer work within the confines of the city ordinances. We did, as homeowners, we built and had to do things on, you know, based on city laws and regulations and ordinances. Why is the developer not being asked to do the same? You know, why are we fast tracking this through so quickly? I have not spoken to a developer. No one has asked for my opinion on this project, or it doesn't sound like they've gone to any of the other neighbors in the area and talked to them about the plan. So, you know, I just ask that, you know, we keep in mind that we do have the upper hand here. We're not a struggling city when it comes to development and new housing and that coming into the market. We don't need to cram 5 houses into a 3-house lot, a 3-property lot. It doesn't really need to happen. It doesn't work with the neighborhood. And it's just, I feel that there could be other possibilities. If they're not the developer that can meet the expectations of the city and the zoning and that, then maybe they're not the right developer for this property, and they should maybe consider building somewhere else in Lakewood that might be more conducive to this type of plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening.
Hello, thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Justin Smith. I live at 13945 Lake Avenue, a few houses down on the south side of the street. I have a few questions and comments. The first one, will anything be done to require that these units stay owner occupied for any amount of time, or will they be available for rental? A couple of points that I wanted to make, just to echo Mrs. Gregory's emphasis on really maybe the unnecessity of Unit C. First, the architect mentioned during his presentation that some work was done on, I believe, Unit B to remove some of the open parking spaces to help eliminate the crowdedness of the driveway and make it easier to access the garages. I think that helps to emphasize the fact that the site is very crowded and difficult to navigate. And I think if we're envisioning this as you know, a place for senior citizens to live, I don't think that it would be wise to make it, you know, difficult to get in and out of the units. The other point that I want to mention is just the narrow space behind Unit C. I don't understand the purpose of that or how it could potentially be used. You know, at some points it's 3 to 4 feet. At most, it seems to be about 6 feet, surrounded by, on one side, a 2-story building, and on another side, an 8-foot brick wall. That seems like not a backyard or a desirable space to be in. It seems like it's going to be more of a cavern, or, you know, just a dark, dank hallway on the north side of a building. It seems like a very unpleasant space. And then the last point that I just wanted to mention, again, echoing just some of the front setbacks. You know, some of the images that were shown kind of compared, you know, here we have a 55 or a 60-foot setback next to a 30-foot setback, and oh, that's about 20 feet, so this is similar to what it will be. You know, and okay, maybe it is 20 feet compared to the house to the east, you know, say it's a 48-foot setback and a 23-foot setback next door. But we're not talking about, you know, a 30-foot setback. We're talking about a 23-foot setback or a 19-foot setback. So if we set that precedent and then decide, oh, if we want to build another house with a, you know, a 20-foot difference in the setback, now we're right on the sidewalk, right? So I don't think it's fair to compare the setbacks at the front to other setbacks and differences along Lake Avenue. I think these are just much too close to the sidewalk. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to be in line?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My name is still Stephen Lamantia, and I still live at 2164 Arthur.
And welcome back.
Yeah,
Thank you.
A quick comment. I'm guessing it's about 20 years ago, one of our neighbors, I lived on this section of Arthur between Athens and Delaware, wanted to put a front porch on his home. His home had, and still has, it's like a 3-step stoop. And because that front of the house, or the front of that proposed porch, would extend beyond the property line of the other houses, not the property line, but the porch line of the other houses, it was disapproved. It said, no, you can't do this. To this day, I think all the rest of us neighbors are there are very happy with that decision. And I see that things seem to have changed a little bit with the Architecture Review Board. I think that not respecting the front porch line or property, I know it's not a property line, the porch line of the other houses here, I think really will harm the look of the neighborhood. I really do, so I wanted to point that out. Second thing that I wanted to point out is just seeing how this is being reviewed. It seems that so much of the design is defined by the wall and by the fact that the area in the back is lower than the area in the front. We have several other projects going on in the Lakewood area, and you've gone through many of them. And I think many of those projects are going to require excavation of earth. And there are other projects underlying. St. Clement's project is coming up. I think there's an opportunity, if we don't rush it too much and if it's the best thing to do, to fill in that area there and maybe help us to resolve a lot of the design problems that have been brought up. So it's just something to think about, trying to think a little bit more globally than just focusing on one property, because we have a city and we want to maintain the beauty of the city. And I saw in the in some of the displays there talking about more compact development. I don't understand how this fits into reasonable, more compact development. I agree with the neighbors that are speaking here. Boy, that Unit C really doesn't seem to belong there. And I just wanted to, I do not live on Lake Avenue, but I wanted to express my opinions in support of the people here and in support of the city of Lakewood. It's wonderful to see the development, but as it has been pointed out a number of times, Lakewood is now going from a stage of trying to rebuild itself or to recover from lesser years to a new stage of progressive development. And I think we have to be very careful in what we're doing. And so I just wanted to speak up for that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Brandy Richmond Smith. I also live at 13945 Lake Avenue. Just really briefly, I just wanted to say, my husband and I just bought our house a year ago. We adore this neighborhood. We spent many years looking at the neighborhood, thinking about, you know, where we wanted to live. We previously lived in Lakewood, but we chose this neighborhood because of just the special culture, the neighborhood association, the style of the home, just the culture of the neighborhood. And just looking at these plans, it hurts to see that we're almost designing a neighborhood within our special neighborhood, and it just doesn't really feel as though our neighborhood has been respected in this design. We haven't had the opportunity to have like forums where, as other neighbors have said, to look at other plans, to discuss, you know, the reason for 5 units. It just, you know, it's a really special place, and I just feel like it deserves more consideration than what we're giving it right here. There's nothing along our neighborhood that looks like this. And to kind of think about 5 units on one lot, essentially one of our lots, it just seems like it's going to be a neighborhood within a neighborhood. And we don't have that right now. And I don't really see why we need to have that. I can understand multiple units, but it just seems like including the neighbors would be respective of the history of the neighborhood and just the development. My other concern with Unit C, as my husband brought up, looking at the wall, personally, if I'm in that unit, safety-wise, I'm wondering about that the northeast side. You know, that could be honestly like a safety hazard. As a woman, I'm thinking like, you know, in that corner, that's like the perfect place for somebody to like hide or whatever. It just doesn't seem like safety has been considered. And, you know, especially with these driveways, it just doesn't seem like with those narrow areas that it would be the safest area. We have a lot of dark areas. In fact, I live along Rose Lane, so I consider the walkway that way. And sometimes I'm concerned about the safety there, but we're narrowing it even more with that wall. And I'm just thinking, like, as a woman, would I want that? I really can't say I would. And I would just appreciate it if we had more opportunity to share our, you know, desires for this property and what we would see as an improvement in our neighborhood instead of just throwing something there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please sign it, and thank you. Anyone else on this item? Please come forward. That's good, thank you.
Virginia Gibson. I live at 13514 Lake Avenue, which is about 11 houses east of this. I just want to ask you to defer your vote on this. You may recall at the first planning meeting, we requested information on the costs of remediating this property. That information has not been forthcoming. I think the developer may feel that because it's private property that they have no obligation to divulge those costs. But what they're asking of our neighborhood with this development is for us to relinquish our rights as owners of property in a medium density district. I think the cost of doing that is to let us know what his costs are. If he expects us to understand why there has to be almost double the density on a lot than any of us are allowed to have, we should know why. We should understand what the costs are here. I don't think that's unreasonable. And I think that if you don't defer this vote and just approve this plan, the message you're sending to our community is that our voices don't matter. You have a sheaf of emails. You showed it to us. How many of those are in support of this project as it is designed? So if you sincerely are listening to us, if you sincerely respect our property rights, you will defer this vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Please sign in. Anyone else? All right, with that, we'll close public comments. I know the city's been recording comments. And we'll see what questions we can work through and answers. I ask the applicant and representative come back up.
Hi.
Your name, sir? Just
Dave Swindell, WXZ Development, 22720 Fairview Center Drive.
Thank you, Dave.
So we will start moving through the questions that we received. One of the first ones was about exterior maintenance and the accessibility of Unit C. Have you guys considered that in the design?
Yeah, so we did look, the ABR gave us some guidelines, as loose as they were, in terms of being able to get a ladder to access essentially the entirety of that facade. So we did that. We essentially took some diagrams of ladders And the one thing that's very notable is that that garage is only a single story at the tightest location. We ran that kind of diagram across the entire back of that house, and there's no part of the house that you can't access with a ladder to clean, paint, get up on the roof to do any maintenance like that. So we have looked at that.
Has your team considered the snow and leaf removal on the driveways?
Well, this will be it'll end up being an HOA, so the HOA will have, the homeowners association will contract in, they'll contract snow plowing and gardening and all that kind of stuff, so they will, the snowplow company will likely, in this case, have to push to the very rear and under heavier snowfall, so we have to haul the snow out.
There's a question on the setbacks and how they might be resolved, and have other alternatives been explored to resolve the setbacks?
I think what's really driving the setbacks is the fact that we're doing, first floor master bedroom living here. It's what is needed. This kind of product is needed in Lakewood. It's needed in the community, I believe, to keep the people here. It is marketable. That's part of what attracted us to the site. But obviously, when you do first floor bedroom, first floor masters, and with the attached garage, it creates a bigger footprint. So, and as far as the density issue that people have been discussing, when we first looked at this site, we looked at mainly townhome product to increase our density to be able to cover our cost, our fixed cost to get this thing done. So we just did not feel like that was the appropriate product for this neighborhood. So we backed away and we kind of settled in on this. The fifth unit is very critical to us from an economic standpoint. It's a combination of things. It's not just the environmental cost, the remediation cost, it is the land cost, it is the cost to demo the existing gas station, all the concrete in there, remove the tanks, and all that. It becomes very critical to cover all those costs, because just going from a 4-unit project to a 5-unit project is a 20% increase in density, which helps, that 20% helps cover those fixed costs coming in. Before we'll even go vertical on this site, we'll have invested about $900,000 to get this site to this point. So it becomes very critical economically.
Have you explored alternatives for remediation of the site, including grants?
We first we took control of the site approximately 2.5 years ago, and the first thing we did was contact Cuyahoga County and to ask them to look at grant options for us, and there were none available because of it was an operating gas station at that point in time. It's not a brownfield. Most of those funds out there are available for brownfields or abandoned sites or closed down sites that are in distress, or publicly owned sites. There are not any grants available to us as a private owner.
Bryce, I don't know if you want to touch on that. The city has also done research on some grants as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there's a program at the State Development Services Agency. It is referred to as, hang on just a sec, I've got it. The Abandoned Gas Station Cleanup Grant Program. It's one of the state's most popular programs. A member of our staff talked to one of their program officers, and there are very strict requirements about getting funding. As you know, that it's public dollars that go into cleanup funds through the state. And qualifying for the program involves what's called having Class C releases from a property. And simply put, Class C, one of the categories to get that classification is that you do not have, there's no responsible party to take care of the releases. So it's essentially envisioning a situation where a community or city is dealing with an abandoned gas station. This site is challenged because there is an existing owner and a developer under contract to perform that work. So the state's position was public money into a project when you have two private owners that are responsible for cleanup, that it wasn't an adequate use of the program.
I'll just mention, with more than 20 years' experience as an environmental lawyer, the grant programs are out there, but they are very time-consuming. You have to thread the needle to get them. I've been on all sides of them. I've been on cost recovery and other things. The contingency that you're going to have to build in to take care of two gas stations, including one going back to the 1920s that was never regulated, is a broad sweep of contingency. I've just seen that elsewhere. I'll give you 2 bits of free advice, too. If you haven't considered putting in this plan, putting in a radon system, you absolutely should, because then you have no issue. It's about $5,000 of PVC, and there's no issue then of any indoor air issue in the future. So it would be a long-term value for these. It's just, we see standards change over time, so.
Yes, yeah. Most of our residential product that we build, we put a passive system, in, right up, so it's there.
Very good.
As a.
Other questions?
For the car traffic on the narrower driveways, has there been analysis to ensure people can get in and out of the garages adequately?
Most of the garages are between 17 and 18 feet from the garage door to the wall, I believe. So I can tell you that at my house, I've got a 17-foot, driveway to back out of. I've lived there 20 years. It's a two-stop turn. So, dum, dum, dum.
Is there anything requiring owner occupation? These are for sale units, or?
Well, that goes to the HOA documentation at the end of the day, but and typically there are some restrictions on short-term rentals, and maybe we're not there. I mean, we're not to that point where we're defining the HOA docs, but it's not intended to be a rental property. Obviously, at these prices, this is a for-sale project going in. Long-term, that will be a function of the HOA.
Has safety been considered, and safety forces accessing the site, including fire trucks?
Well, we've done many of these urban infill projects. We've done a lot of, and had fire departments, approve those, obviously, and I've done a lot of them actually with 9 or 10 foot driveways under very similar circumstances, so we know it's been approved before.
There were a few questions on the front yard setback, including the reference to the Arthur neighbor that couldn't add the front porch. Just a note on zoning for that. This is a rezoning of the property, so the planned development process considers front yard setbacks that would not necessarily have to follow the building line, versus a residential home would have to follow that building line setback. So this is a rezoning of the property, so that those setbacks are set as part of this process.
Just to add a point to that, Mr. Chair, if I may, I mean, the administration's position on that is clear. We absolutely recognize that the units are proposed in front of the traditional building line setback as established on Lake Avenue. We are not hiding that at all. In fact, we're not trying to achieve it. And the really important condition is that we're transitioning the site from a legal non-conforming use as a gas station and vehicle repair shop surrounded by residential property. So a house on Arthur, Marlowe, Northland, Mars, if it had the same condition, we may consider that. If it had a mid-block, non-conforming gas station site surrounded by predominantly residential uses, it may be an opportunity to consider plan development. If it were a residential structure that was built as a residential structure, platted as a residential structure, that we feel very strongly that it would be very inappropriate to do something like this. But it's really because of the land use that is in place that we feel it's appropriate to at least consider this as an option.
This question was kind of addressed by the street parking, but has there been any extra thought on visitor parking for the site?
Oh, we had, when we went through Architectural Review Board, we had at one point placed two parking spots at the left rear corner there, and they asked us actually to remove them. So, and I think there is street parking in the neighborhood, and that's what will have to happen there. I think that oftentimes when we see these kind of tight, compact units, what happens when there's visitors, sometimes they'll pull in sideways right in front of the garage door, and that's very common. I think generally our experience is the folks that live here figure it out, so.
And I think notably, the site plan is really set so that the 2A units are facing lake, and then there's that central muse space, which is really accessing the front doors of all the other units. So to have parking somewhere else on the site, and something that we found through that ABR discussion, those people have to then walk all the way around to the front. So really the practicality is that people are going to park on lake just like they do for a lot of the other properties there when they go to visit any of the other residences in the neighborhood.
There were a few comments on the space between the wall and Unit C to the north. Can you talk through that space and from a design perspective, what you've worked on?
Yeah, so, some of the concerns about safety, I think, we could address that by, putting a gate possibly next to the garage there to really cut off that access, back there. But really, we understand this is a tight site. It's not the most palatable space, but really that C unit's patio is off to the west there. You can kind of see it bordered by the greenery just to the northwest of that unit. So really that's used as an access corridor to get over there. Personally, from an architectural perspective, I really think having that wall back there to do whatever you want on could be really cool. But it really is kind of an access point to get to the space that they're going to use, which is their patio to the northwest.
Similarly, there was a comment about the neighborhood within the neighborhood. Can you talk about some of the design features that you've used to try and integrate it into the neighborhood?
Yeah, and I don't know if we can go back to either one of the renderings or the elevations. I don't know the site plan does the best justice, but. Yeah, so I think these are great. There was some discussion about the architecture, and really, we took a lot of cues, and we did include some photos on previous presentations to both Planning Commission and ABR of surrounding properties throughout Lakewood, but also just right on Lake Avenue. And we really did take a lot of the design aesthetics from those neighboring properties, kind of that craftsman style, a lot of windows, brick, hardy siding, but really a lot of details that come from the neighboring properties. Throughout the units, and not only just on the Lake Avenue homes. I know one of the points is that the porches kind of stick out into that front setback, but we really feel those are critical to the language of neighboring homes throughout Lakewood. So I think really that design aesthetic has been key from the very beginning. We do quite a variety of architecture at Dimmitt Architects. We sometimes tend towards a more modern aesthetic, and we actually did a couple different studies early on in the process, and those more modern studies were kind of put to the side in favor of really playing well with the neighboring architecture, Lakewood architecture. Obviously we think these are very handsome buildings, but we do feel like they fit in scale, material-wise, kind of the breakdown of the massing of the units.
Mr. Chair, the last thing I wanted to ask David, and it's related to the remediation of the site. I know you mentioned the cost. That's very helpful. Can you share with the commission and members of the audience maybe the technical, more of the technical components of that survey analysis? And you know, there was the difference between when the tanks were up closer to the street, canopy was up at the front, and then following the move on the canopy to the rear. Maybe some of the technical details of what you're required to do per the remediation. Any details you'd have on that, I think would be helpful.
We've been working on it for 2.5 years. The investigation of the site, it has a pretty heavy-duty environmental history here, and very complicated. So we've gone through about 5 different stages of investigation, starting with the phase 1 and the phase 2, and tight testness studies on the existing underground tanks, and then into a couple stages of Tier 1 delineation. We're past that now, and we're currently engaged in a Tier 2 evaluation, which is really going to define the remediation itself, the levels of remediation that's necessary. So the site had petroleum releases on record going back into the 90s, the early to mid-90s. There were several releases on the site, petroleum releases into the groundwater and the soils on the site. Through the previous history, most of that stuff had been cleaned up under, when old tanks were taken out, so there aren't really buster records on the old original tanks there. But the tanks, there's 3 tanks on site. They're grouped kind of underneath the parking lot towards the north and west side of the garage there. So at this point in time, there is soil contamination above action levels, and there is groundwater contamination above action levels. However, when we're converting this to a residential use, there's stricter standards there, but there's no, the key factor for the groundwater is that there's no water wells, or it's not going to be water that's drinkable, so we'll be fine there. The actual cleanup of the soils, we have defined areas that are contaminated where the releases previously happened now, so we have a pretty good idea of that delineation, but we won't really know until we pull the tanks out what's underneath those tanks. So there's extraordinary, we can't tell you what the total cost of the remediation will be until we actually pull the tanks out. So that's where the risk is for us. That's another reason why the 5th unit is very, very critical for us. I threw out a number of $900,000. Be careful. That's not all environmental cost. That is when we look at land, we have to, and develop a land and those costs, and how those costs gets absorbed, and the revenue we need to do that. That's all those soft costs, including Paul and any design, environmental, land costs. We've been paying taxes on this property for a couple of years and stuff like that, so all that adds up. The actual investigation cost to this point in time, this is not publicly funded, but I'll throw the numbers out there. Right now we've spent about $85,000 in just investigation work. We have got another 15 to 20 to go. We'll spend about $50,000 to remove the tanks, and then the remediation is, who knows? I think it will likely be between $150,000 and $200,000 to clean the site up. And that's our goal here, we took on this project as kind of a personal quest. I mean, we are active in urban infill, so we thought a very, fun site, neat site to do. We're all very aware of the history in the neighborhood. I used to live down the street, 6 houses down, when I first moved to Cleveland, so I'm very aware of it. So we're trying to be sensitive as we can be to the neighborhood through architecture and everything we're doing. But we tackled this projects for personal uses and at great risk to us to get this done. And part of it was to clean this area up, which it needs desperately.
Any other questions or comments outstanding?
I believe that covers our list, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think you can have a seat. Thank you very much. So I'll open it up to the commission for any discussion, consideration, how we want to approach this.
I actually have
And questions as well.
I have a follow-up question to the city. The question was floated, has security forces, the fire department, have they reviewed this? Or, has that been considered? My question to the city is, has the fire department had a chance to review access to Unit C?
The plans were sent to the fire department to review them. They did not respond with concerns at this point, so we can follow up with them on those.
So their lack of response, so you haven't gotten a response back one way or the other from the fire department, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Can our approval be conditional on approval by the fire department?
Yes, and as part of the building plan review, the fire department reviews all of the building plans as part of the permit process, so we will definitely facilitate that earlier in the process.
So there's several, what you're saying is there's several different steps for safety review at the building level, arguably for city council. If some sort of report is coming forward, I mean, in order to get insurance for anything like this, they'd have to have the ability to, it would be uninsurable if the fire department couldn't get there.
I would say we would not recommend any vote by city council before the fire chief weighed in with the fire marshal's approval of the way to do emergency services at this facility. I'll say we have, our fire department in particular has gotten good at reviewing projects like this. I'd bring up the Muse at Rockport, which is the most recent one on Fry. Site plan is different, to be sure, but dimensions that are similar. So that's something we would definitely require before city council would vote on something like this.
One other related comment to that would be just consideration for address placement. I mean, this would be fairly unique in the neighborhood to have units nestled behind other units, and in the event of a mutual aid response, you have a neighboring fire department responding, might not be familiar with the neighborhood. It'd be important to have signage, to be able to get to those rear units so that they know those rear units were there.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Cruzen brought up another thought that I now have. Do we know where the mailboxes will be located? Will there be one central point for all of the units, or will the mail truck driver be going down these proposed driveways?
Good question for our developer.
Applicant, you want to take a shot at that question? Mailboxes, I think generally they park on Lake Avenue and they walk, so.
I don't know for sure, but typically we don't find that out until we approach, once we get to construction drawings and we approach the Postal Service, and they kind of dictate what happens. I mean, we're willing to do a common box, but it really is up to the post office. Yeah. Can I make one other comment about fire?
Sure, since that has been an open question here.
Yeah, you're talking about making a condition, and one of the things, again, I've done many projects with similar kind of conditions going back. I don't think the fire department will have a problem, but we would be willing to offer to the fire department that we'll put a home fire suppression system in these units if necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Cruzen.
Can we go back to the site plan for a moment? As I understand it, there was a photometric drawing that was shown that showed the parking in the northwest corner that's since been eliminated per the ABR. I'm looking at this plan. I too echo some of the concerns of the residents in the neighborhood and some of the feedback we've gotten through the letters, concern for the front yard setback. In looking at this plan, I think there's an opportunity to gain another 5 feet on the western 2 units by shifting the patio that serves Unit B in the northwest corner to the north of the parking garage. It does 2 things. One, it eliminates the awkward placement of the patio directly outside the window of the master bedrooms of Suite C. And 2, that would allow you to shift the western units A and B back 5 feet. I know there's probably a desire to have the access to that patio off of the dining area in Unit B. You could put a pathway there that would carry you to the north of the garage for that patio. So that's, just looking at this, that's a clear way to get 5 feet that would bring it further into compliance and further into lining up with matching the 23, 24-foot setback that's present in the eastern Unit A.
Can I say something real quick? That issue was brought up at the last meeting, and they said there were fire problems with your suggestion. I don't know exactly what it was.
So
Thank you. So,
sorry, go ahead.
no, it's all right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
That crossed my mind as well. I think the architect would be able to work something out. You have Unit C touching Unit B. There might, the code may require a fire-rated wall at that point. I don't know what the distances are, but it's something that I think could be addressed.
I can speak to that very quickly. So we did look into the code. Essentially what it is a limitation on the openings that we can have on the B unit or any of the windows facing that. So we just get more and more limited the tighter that we get as those units get closer together. There's a limitation. It's like 50% for a certain dimension, 25 for a certain dimension. That 10-foot, which is what we have now there, allows for that B unit to kind of have, which is kind of the majority of their windows and patio or patio access door there. So we're kind of working with those limitations, but it's not something that we couldn't look at further.
Well, I'll make some general comments. This is a singular site in Lakewood, and the plan development code is perfectly set up to deal with this as a singular site. I first want to say I have no concerns whatsoever about this being a precedent anywhere else in Lakewood. It is a pre-existing, non-conforming, walled former gas station, now closed gas station site in a residential neighborhood that grew up after it. So what to do with that is the dilemma that we have, the question that we have. It is not, there won't be another one like this in Lakewood that anybody's going to have to worry about this being a precedent for, particularly procedurally the way we're talking about it. I'm very concerned about the environmental on the site in the sense that all the best estimates that this is going to be a significant improvement in Lakewood to clean it up, and there's big contingencies. As consultants and others who have looked at it, I've just seen so many projects go sideways, and something that doesn't fully clean this up or relies on public grants would add years and years to and the city would probably have to buy it, do it, and then wait for development in this, whatever development might come. So that is a long road as opposed to a proposal that will clean something that probably hasn't been cleaned in almost 100 years, take care of soil and groundwater contamination. So those two issues, I think, the fact that this is already walled, it is already segregated, it's just such a singular site from the rest of the neighborhood, that wall is staying, and I really applaud the architects for the comments about the, trying to make the back unit fit more with the wall. There's not a lot of view space for a privacy issue in this iteration of this. The biggest question in my mind comes back to the front setbacks. And I live on Lake Avenue. I drive this every day. I've been thinking about this parcel since I first moved to Lakewood. This parcel was a literally glaring exception because it had a marathon sign right out front on the sidewalk. As nice as the gas station was and as great as the Schmitz were, I wonder what was going to happen with this, and particularly as the rumors of some potential redevelopment came in. Every time I drive by there, the thing that I'll just say stands out to me is those two cherry trees in the front and that whole landscape are like a natural line already. And it does not offend my sense of the grandeur of Lake Avenue or of what would be there if those were front porches. That's just already a natural line, and it'll be better than having a sign out front. To me, that's the most compelling thing with the adjustments in the back is the front setbacks. And I don't see, I guess, I don't see that is going to change. Certainly, it's not going to change the market value of the neighborhood. $700,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 units will increase, and a clean site will increase the value in these units. I don't think it's already an anomaly and an aberration in a beautiful neighborhood. I don't think this is an oppressive continued use of it. That's my view.
Mr. Chair. Sure. That's a compelling, argument for allowing this use in this proposed development. It's getting to be late not to throw anything else into the mix. One of the provisions of the plan development is to take into consideration energy efficient design, stormwater management across as long as we're considering environmental issues. Hoping maybe we could have the applicant come back up and talk just for a brief moment about any environmental design features, energy efficient design features that are going into these buildings and potential stormwater management.
Was that relevant factors? You want to please come back?
Typically, everything that we're doing now, I mean, we will go for some green certifications. I'm not sure what program yet. We're studying LEED for homes right now. We've been doing that in all of our current for sale housing projects. The tricky thing with the LEED program that we're trying to sort out is we have buyers coming in, and if they want to put a rain shower in or something like that, it can get a mess up your scoring and that kind of stuff. So we're kind of tweaking that a little bit right now, but there will be a green certification for the homes. I can't tell you if it's going to be LEED or Enterprise Green or whatever program it is, but we will build to green standards. Yeah.
And I think notably, the energy code, even for residential, has advanced dramatically in even the last 5 years. And so in terms of insulation in the walls, 2x6 walls with R20 insulation and R40 in the attic, I mean, that type of thing is now code required. And so those will be the lowest starting point, and then obviously would be much above that.
Good, thank you. Mr. Baker, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't want to mistake my understanding of that setback. I mean, that back unit is the one that, of all of them, gives me the most hesitation. However, between me and my neighbor's house is 3 feet. And I have enough room to do all the maintenance I need to do, and I don't feel unsafe there. That's not an uncommon distance between houses in Lakewood. It is a little uncommon in this neighborhood, which is, I think, the distinction here. However, I can't say it any better than the chair said it as far as the fact that this is not, I don't see Planning Commission or the city recommending plan use development all up and down Lake Avenue, you know, to do 5 units on two or three parcels. I am, you know, as I think about this, I think we very well could have had another developer come in here and try to put 10 units. And you know, a townhome style development that seems to be very popular. And I think most developers probably would have done something like that with this site. So from a perspective of using a creative tool in our code, the plan use development, to take care of a site that for 100 years has been a problem, and to the chair's point, you know, will cost unknown amounts of money to remediate and make Lakewood in this area cleaner, right? I think this is about as good as we can get. And to some of the public's points, you know, we want to make sure that the developers that we bring into our city are doing what we want them to do in our city. And I think this is what we want them to do in our city.
What about the sheep of
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Ms. Rossiter.
Yes. Let me just gather my thought for a second. I literally forgot what I was going to say. Wait, give me a second.
Sure.
Monica, while you're bringing that up, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, Mr. Cruson, I'd like to maybe think out loud the suggestion that you brought up earlier, and maybe even welcome the applicant back up to the podium as we maybe play this out a little bit more. You know, I think you're referencing the western 2 units, A and B, with the idea of trying to push the units back to achieve a greater front yard setback. Maybe that's even more in line with the unit A to the east, where you see the foundation line goes to 31 feet. But is that, do I have that about right? Trying to see if we can shift those units back?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. You know, I would say we're very open to that, and I'd like to bring the applicant back up to see if that's something that we can talk about this evening. You know, I understand there's some building code issues, especially with openings related to how Unit B and C will speak to one another from a code standpoint, but I'm wondering if there's a way that we can pick up a few extra feet on that front yard setback in those back other 2 units.
Gentlemen, I'll invite you back up, please.
I think to make it equivalent with the easterly unit, we'd move it back 2 feet. The easterly unit has a 28 foot 9 inches to the corner of the building, and the westerly unit has a 26 foot 8 inch setback from the street. So,
So if the AB unit on the west went back 2 feet, and I think the one thing that's notable about kind of the minimum dimension there, that's noted at 19 foot and 23 foot, that's to that porch, which, you know, is kind of a single-story element. Really, that massing, I think the critical number in the overall scheme of the plans is the 28-foot 9 inches on the eastern A unit, and that 26-foot 8, 26-foot 9 on the western unit. So that would at least make those equivalent.
and another factor is just the architecture itself. We've got some pretty good size overhangs on these roofs that come down. So we really don't have, we got 10-foot building to building, but not roof to roof back there.
Thinking out loud, does that satisfy you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so that recommendation would be dropping it 2 feet, an additional 2 feet on that western unit.
The thought of the overhangs had crossed my mind too after my comment, and not looking at the elevations in front of me, but how those, interact with each other. I will say this: I really appreciate what you've done with the roof line of Unit C in respect to just the overall massing and shifting as much of that mass forward towards the front of the house. Just seeing that contrast when you earlier in the presentation when you showed the two massing, it's a pretty stark contrast. But No, I do think if we can have the setback match to the corner of the house, I think that would be appropriate.
That would work, yeah. We have over 2 feet overhangs on these roofs on here. It's that Craftsman style.
So was there clarity to adjust it? Or what was thought out loud here?
Yeah, I think the adjustment is an additional 2 feet on the westernmost setback line.
Yes, we'll do that.
And then it would match the Unit A to the east. 29 feet.
Any further discussion at this time?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to echo what all the rest of the commission members are saying. Not only is the applicant proposing the remediation of what seems like a severely contaminated site, they're also reducing the amount of non-pervious area from around 85% to a little bit less than 60%. So to echo Mr. Crusen's comment about stormwater control on the site, I feel like the reduction in non-pervious area will also help. And I applaud you for your personal interest in the site and the risk you're taking to make Lakewood a better place to live.
There's no more discussion. Ken, would you go to the findings page? Chair will make a motion to approve or to recommend approval of this with the findings posted here and an adjustment to the western setback boundary of 2 additional feet farther back.
I'll second.
It's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Does that capture everything that?
Well,
Hold on. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it was it's obviously with the safety, fire access, but I think that'll come.
I think the process.
For building permits, yeah.
Correct. They won't build anything until that happens.
Mr. Chair, the only other one would be, I think, the energy efficient design, picking a green building certification. I don't know that we need to dictate which one, but I think that it's important that we carry that forward as well.
That's a good point. I'll amend my motion and in addition to add, what else? Green
And
building
Mr. Chair,
design.
there's one more. The landscaping in front of that wall on the west side was not in the site plan presented, but should be in the final approved site plan.
Well, we understand, well, that's an ABR approval. That's why I asked about the landscaping, right? So even though it's not depicted here, it's part of what's been approved by ABR already, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Well, we'll just put it in.
take the
Belt and
opportunity to
suspenders.
clarify that tonight.
Let's do that.
It is a screening measure as well, which is under the purview of the commission.
All right, so my further amended motion is to, I'll just restate it. Make a motion to recommend that the director approve this plan development with the express findings that are on the screen here and the addition of a change to the additional 2-foot setback on the western side to nearly 29 feet, as well as screening on the area on the western property boundary coming forward to the edge of the house. Is that what it was? The edge of the unit?
Correct, and the green certification.
And further that the applicant will achieve some green certification for the buildings. Is there a second for that lengthy motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Good luck. I want to echo to the applicants, you still have a great deal of process in front of the city and city council. I say it all the time. You need to talk to the neighbors because you do want your buyers to be neighbors of these neighbors, and it's important to the city. And there's continuing process, so I strongly encourage everyone to keep talking. We have,
Can I make it real quick? I think the property that you're gonna landscape belongs to the house on the west. I don't think it's on the site's property.
thank you. They can only landscape what they own. We'll move on to our next docket item, which is, I've lost the minutes here, or the agenda. We're taking GTI docket number 051519, and GTI Ohio LLC. The applicant, who's been very patient for several meetings, please come forward. Is the applicant here? For the lot split.
So we're trying to consolidate the two single lots into one lot. I believe the gentleman had asked about the back parking lot. And there is.
Could you state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, state your name and then also sign the, I think, it's up there. Might be in our.
My name's
feed.
Steve Barlow. I'm a professional surveyor for Manick and Smith Group. We're at 2600 Chagrin Boulevard in Shaker Heights.
And my name is Christina Dahman, and I work at Ice Miller and here as an agent representative of GTI.
Do you have a trip back to Columbus too after this? You have to. What's the gentleman's name who came to the last two meetings?
John Overly.
Yeah, he really did you a favor by making you come back.
This is actually the earliest it's going to end.
Too, but no, I appreciate it, and it's good to meet everybody. And he says hello.
Very good. All right, so if you can continue, it's a lot consolidation that was required by our last approval last month. But I believe you were talking about the back parking lot.
Yeah, the back parking lot, when I was doing the research for the boundary survey, I found an easement across the westerly adjoiner to the parking lot parcel. I can't say for sure that it is still in force because I'm not a title researcher. But I did find the original deed, or one of the original deeds for that parcel shows the easement, and then I also have found a survey plat from 1980 that still shows that easement. I don't know if there's any other concerns as far as the survey part of it goes.
No, I mean, yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. The question, I guess, is more for the city procedurally. Thank you for your comments. So with what's before us tonight and the parcel in the back, what's before us is what the required lot consolidation to build the building, correct?
Correct. To build the building, it cannot span two lots, so this would be a consolidation for that. And by consolidating, they are making that commercial lot more conforming with the code for the minimum square footage.
And basically, the north lot would, I mean, it's the same owners, correct? So that if they ever try to sell it, it's part of the parking, it would come back for the conditional use, would upset the conditional use for the dispensary.
Correct.
Okay, so there's not a lot of risk.
I look at maps all day, I was just curious.
No, you're right, you're right.
No, I do have some, I mean, I guess, why not do it? What's the argument for not consolidating into being one parcel?
I'm not arguing against it. I'm only arguing about what's in front of us tonight, and if they want to come back and consolidate that, it's a very simple measure. But we don't have that in front of us, including the surveyor's work.
I don't know if you guys have doesn't seem like you might know why it's
well,
separated.
no, I know
but-
why, and I think it's for the reasons already stated. So I don't think there's anything more that needs to be added at this point.
I would just add from a zoning perspective, a commercial parking lot's a permitted use in a zoning district, so just purely from a zoning standpoint, it can be used just as a parking lot. I think it needs to it's a part of the parking plan that was approved as the conditional use. So if that property were to be sold, for example, and that new owner did not want to provide a shared parking agreement, as an example, to the dispensary, then they would need to come back in front of the commission and show a new parking plan.
Well, any of our 3 remaining audience members want to speak on this topic? Please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Marius Marita. I'm the property owner next to this, west of this proposed.
Welcome back.
Thank you. And we have, I believe on the last meeting, we have agreed that the easement, that if there is an easement, we don't know if there is an easement. I'm currently not aware if there is an easement on that west. That wasn't going to be used for the business purposes. Basically, all the deliveries, the trucks, the customers, anybody that comes in there, the business proposes. I think that's what I understand now, to exit through that west and then come around that building in front. There's 2 entrances to that building with 22 units. And I really would like to make sure that the commission is going to withstand with that west easement to be blocked, not to be used for the exit of the customers and whatever delivery trucks they have for that. That's my main concern.
Great. Anything specific about the lot consolidation you want to talk about tonight? I appreciate you reiterating that concern, but in front of us is just the consolidating the 2 separate lots into one
Or
tonight.
2 front lots?
Yeah.
I thought I noticed on the agenda there was the 3 lots. But if the lot in the back is not, I guess
It's not part of the consolidation. So I appreciate your statement, and our approval last month noted and provided for that access to the west not to be used unless you agreed to it. So unless you agreed as the property to the west, unless you agreed to that as access.
That's my only concern. I want to
Very
make
good.
sure that's going to stand.
Yeah. There's nothing we're talking about in this lot consolidation has anything at all to do with that.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
All right. No other comment? Any comment from the city?
Nothing more at this time.
Okay. Well, then the chair will
I just
entertain a
wanted
motion.
to make one comment, Chair, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Mr. Papke.
Yeah,
Came a voice from above. so.
yeah, the engineering department is still reviewing everything to make sure that everything closes out with the lot, so if you could, put that.
Looking for a condition?
Yeah, based on the approval from city engineer.
Very good. Would that be an approved survey? Is that a survey approved by the city engineer?
Yes.
Okay. So the chair will again entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the lot consolidation at 11818 Madison Avenue on the condition that the survey be approved by the city's engineer.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much. Good luck. Safe drive back.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. And next docket item, our very patient folks for the docket number 0511-19 at Castlewood Apartments. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Tiana Brandt with Shersa Consulting on behalf of Sprint, and we are here for the apartment building Castlewood Apartments, 17600 Detroit Avenue, and Sprint is proposing to add an additional 3 antennas. I believe there are originally 3 now, and then we're going to replace the existing 3, but then add another 3. And they have obviously agreed to not paint the antennas the color that they currently are, but match them to the building.
Thank you. City.
Yes, Mr. Chair. As you can see on the building, there are existing antennas which they will be removing from the building. They are replacing these antennas with some additional equipment and some additional antennas. So because it's not a one-for-one replacement, it is before you today. So utilizing the same system, but adding some units. This is where the existing are, and then there was a proposal on the same building before us in June that was approved that was approximately in these areas on the rooftop. So those have not been installed to date, but will be coming likely this summer as part of T-Mobile's system. So they will be removing the antennas at these locations and adding their systems and additional antennas at the orange locations. If there is any conflict in this area, there may need to be some shifting between the systems, but it's more a matter of quantity rather than specific location for us. The antennas are going to be installed in line with the roof structure as requested, and this is in an existing, the cabinet's in an existing location of a cabinet currently. They are 8 feet in length, if the applicant could confirm that, which is less than our 12 feet.
Yes, that is correct.
So again, painted to match the brick building. There are a few that are unpainted on the roof, and it does make a big difference to paint it the same color as the brick, so we would want to make sure that happened. That is all I have.
Very good. Any comment from the public? No? No public? All right. Any comment from the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Cruzen?
what are the cable pathways that would be visible to the ground to the antennas?
I'm sorry, what are,
The cable pathways, is the cabling enclosed in conduit, or what, what?
it will be enclosed, yeah, it won't be visible at all.
I guess I'm asking, is it penetrating through the wall from behind, or is there
No,
conduit
it'll be
running?
encasing,
But that casing will be wrapping around the parapet wall down
yes,
to the unit. Is that a paintable material?
I believe so. I did speak to the project manager today, and he said everything that would be facing the street would be painted to match the building. But I can confirm that, make sure that's,
And if I understood this correctly, I may have missed this, but the existing antennas, those are 12 feet in length? Is that?
The maximum by code is 12 feet, so as long as they are under 12 feet, they are within code.
What is the dimensions of the existing units? Do you have any sense?
no, I don't. But I can get that information for you as well.
Can I come join?
Yes, you can.
Hello,
Please.
I'm Amy Wickland. I'm also with Sure Site representing Sprint. And our offices are in Beechwood, Ohio. We have some sizes of the antennas that we propose to place, and they are in very tiny writing that I might need my colleague to read for me. What does that say?
That's 63 inches. I'm sorry, 63 feet.
Inches.
Oh, yeah, sorry, we're both blind. Sorry. Yeah,
And then-
inches,
And this one too.
72 inches.
So they're both less than the 8 feet we even discussed.
Okay.
And what's up there now is something similar in size, but I don't have that exactly.
Thank you.
The note actually said all and connecting hardware and everything to be painted to match existing as well, so it's not just the antenna. Great. All right, any other discussion? I'll make a motion to approve these antennas to clarify to match existing building. The note that's on there says proposed Sprint antennas, mounting hardware and equipment to be painted to match existing and make sure existing building. The motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank
Good luck.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for your
waiting.
patience. I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. We are